Chapter 62. Hula. A sound was heard. Ron's head popped out of the water beside a small river on the outskirts of St. Paulo. Didn't I escape now? Ron was a little proud. After leaving the dark organization stronghold, facing layers of interrogation, he had a plan. He entered the sewers and swam all the way to the river. Escaping from St. Paulo was a piece of cake. Search for the latest updates here. He shook his hair, wiped his face, and swam to the shore. He climbed ashore in a few steps, took off his wet clothes, and changed into clean clothes from his space bag. Warrior from the underworld, please accept my summon. Come out, skeleton warrior. At this time, Ron began to summon the skeleton warrior. Not long after, a skeleton warrior with a dull look stood in front of Ron. Ron smiled and reached out to help the skeleton warrior climb onto its back. With a thought, the skeleton warrior carried Ron and ran as fast as a horse. Of course, the skeleton warrior's speed was not as fast as a horse, but it was much faster than Ron walking, and it also saved a lot of effort. Ron, your method is really good. Homelin's eyes were full of praise. You actually thought of using a skeleton warrior as a mount. Very good. So many people in the Scourge Church didn't think of it before. Ron smiled again and touched his head. Oh right, Grandpa Homelin, at that time. Can the necromancers of the Scourge Church summon mounts? Soldier-level necromancers don't have the ability to summon mounts. Homelin thought and said, summoning mounts requires at least the strength of a master. Master? That's a necromancer. What can a necromancer summon? Gargoyles. The two chatted along the way as they made their way to the border of Holy Empire. Ron deliberately chose a remote mountain path. Since he was riding a skeleton warrior, he didn't need to expend too much energy to traverse the mountains as if they were flat ground. After traveling for over a month, they finally arrived at the border city of Holy Empire, Asinaris. Asinaris was an important border town of the Holy Roman Empire. Strictly speaking, it was a military town. The 13th, 14th, and 15th legions of the empire were stationed here. The most frequent visitors here were merchants entering and leaving the city, as well as the patrolling soldiers of the Holy Roman Empire. In order to avoid being recognized, Ron wore a mask. In this border city, the inspection was not as strict as in the imperial city of Sao Paulo. You pass. Just as Ron was about to walk out of the door, a cold voice stopped him. Ron was startled. Pass. What's a pass? Ron was stunned and shook his head. I don't have one. No pass. The soldier was suspicious. He looked up and down at Ron, as if he was guarding against a thief. At this time, several soldiers in the distance also looked over. Sir, pass. At this time, a fat merchant handed over a pass. The soldier took it, opened it, and waved his hand to let him pass. So the pass is that red book. Only then did Ron see what the pass looked like, but he was worried again. How could he get a pass? You can't leave without a pass. This is the rule. The soldier said to him with a sullen face. Oh, I'm sorry, sir. I left my pass at home. I'll go get it. Ron replied and hurriedly left. Generally speaking, the pass was a symbol of identity when a country went out. It was issued by each country. Generally speaking, the pass of every human country was basically universal. However, there were restrictions on the issuance of the pass. Usually, only merchants, mercenaries, and nobles could have a pass. Ordinary civilians didn't have a pass. Ron had always been an ordinary civilian in the Holy Roman Empire. Naturally, it was impossible for him to have a pass. Ron helplessly stood to the side, looking at other people holding a red pass in their hands. He had the urge to snatch it. However, it was unwise to snatch it here. The soldiers coming and going made Ron scared, but he also knew that it was impossible to leave Asinaris without a pass. Grandpa Homelin, what should I do? Ron was completely at his wit's end. Homelin hesitated for a moment. If you need, I can help you kill your way out. Forget it, don't. Ron immediately rejected Homelin's tempting proposal. He didn't want anything to happen to Grandpa Homelin. I'll take a look first and see if I can come up with a good idea, Ron said helplessly. At this time, in a corner of the city wall, some sounds attracted his attention. What's going on over there? Ron was puzzled, seeing more and more people gathering over there. He couldn't hold back his curiosity and walked over. In the crowd, a little girl of about 13 or 14 years old was curled up there. Her hair was unkempt, her clothes were ragged, and her pale face was streaked with tears. Due to excessive fear, her body was trembling. Beside her, an old man was lying down. He looked like a penniless beggar who had been dead for a long time. His corpse emitted a foul stench. Beside her, there were a few noble young men in luxurious clothes. They were laughing and fooling around, pointing at the little girl and gossiping. Hee, this girl is selling her body to bury her father? She's really filial. A yellow-haired youth in luxurious clothes said with a grin as he picked his teeth. Although he was speaking in human language, his eyes were sizing up the little girl. How do you know it's her father? Maybe it's her grandfather? Another blue-haired youth said with a smile. Maybe it's her husband. A brown-haired youth clapped his hands and laughed. Ha! A few youths in luxurious clothes laughed unscrupulously. The little girl clenched her teeth and knelt on the ground without saying a word. Her long hair hung down and covered her face. At this time, an even more outrageous thing happened. I didn't expect that after not seeing him for a few days, this old fellow actually died. The yellow-haired youth smiled and reached out to pull out his sword. With a bang sound, he stabbed the corpse of the girl's grandfather. You. The girl didn't expect those people to do this. She raised her head and a trace of anger appeared in her eyes. This lowly commoner is a lowly commoner. Look, this old beggar is so dirty. The yellow-haired youth smiled and used his sword to pick out the old man's intestines. A few people laughed happily. The poor old man was already dead, but those people didn't even let his corpse go. Wah, you, don't touch my grandfather. The girl cried and rushed up to fight with those youths. Yo, you actually dare to fight? At this time, she was pushed by the blue-haired youth and staggered, falling to the ground. She rushed up to fight again, but looking at her thin and weak body, she couldn't hurt those tall and strong youths in fine clothes. Those people were laughing and joking, just looking for fun. The surrounding people looked at the little girl with sympathy, but seeing those youths acting as if there was no one around, many people were angry but didn't dare to say anything. Many people shook their heads and walked away. What's going on? Ron's eyes flashed with anger as he asked the old man next to him. That old man shook his head. Sigh, this pair of grandfather and granddaughter came here from the outside. It's been a few months, and those guys have been harassing them every day. But a few days ago, that girl's grandfather died of sudden illness, leaving only this girl. What a pity those guys still haven't let her go. These scum. Ron was angry. His eyes seemed to be spewing fire. He clenched his fists so hard that his bones made cracking sounds. The thing he couldn't stand the most was bullying the weak. This was also related to his previous experience. No one here understood the little girl's feelings better than Ron. Young man, don't mess around. The old man whispered. I advise you, these guys can't be provoked. That yellow-haired one is the son of Asanara City's city lord. Ron, calm down. Homeland's voice sounded at the same time. I know what you want to do, but this way your identity will be exposed. Damn it. Ron also knew the severity of the matter. He clenched his teeth, relaxed his clenched fists, and took a deep breath. It's just a dead man. Why are you so anxious? It's not like he's your husband. The yellow-haired youth laughed as he waved his sword and cut the old man's body into pieces. The girl was completely stunned. She even lost her consciousness. She stared blankly at the pile of rotten flesh and blood on the ground. She ran a few steps and suddenly knelt on the ground as tears flowed out of her eyes. Grandpa! The heart-wrenching cry caused the onlookers to be moved. Looking at those few youths, their eyes became unkind. These few youths were completely unaware. In their territory, who were they afraid of? Those who dared to go against them in the past. Their bones had already turned into ashes. At this time, the yellow-haired youth seemed to have discovered a new continent. He excitedly said, Hey, look, that girl's appearance is not bad. I didn't expect young master's eyes to be so sharp. You can even see this. The yellow-haired youth said, Clean her up, then we can have a good time. The brown-haired youth said with a smile. His eyes flashed with a lustful light. The three of them exchanged glances with each other. The blue-haired youth and the brown-haired youth quickly walked over. They stretched their hands under the little girl's armpits and lifted her up. The little girl seemed to be stupid. She let them lift her up and did not even resist. Animals. They actually won't even let a 13-year-old girl go. The onlookers shook their heads. Their eyes showed a sympathetic look, but no one came forward to stop their atrocities. The few well-dressed youths turned a deaf ear to the surrounding discussion. This kind of thing, they had done it more than once. They were already familiar with it. They ignored those angry eyes. Grandpa Hamelin, I can't hold it anymore. Ron was so angry that his teeth chattered. His body could not help but tremble because of anger. Ron, you have to calm down. It's useless to be angry. Hamelin reminded. Grandpa Hamelin, I can't hold it anymore. Ron looked at the back of those people, gritted his teeth, and said, Grandpa, let me be willful for once, just once. Chapter 63. Ron moved like a gust of wind and chased after them. Sigh. Hamelin couldn't help but sigh. His anger was the same as Ron's, but he didn't approve of Ron's actions. Even if he wanted to act bravely for a just cause, he had to see the situation clearly. He was currently in the Holy Roman Empire, and he was still wanted. It was clearly not the time or place for him to act bravely for a just cause. All of you stop right there. Ron shouted and stopped the youths. Let her go. The yellow-haired youth glanced at Ron from the corner of his eyes, and a sinister smile appeared on his face. Yo, a busybody actually came out. The blue-haired youth laughed. Hee hee. I didn't think that someone would dare to cause trouble for us. How many years has it been? The brown-haired youth said. Yes. We broke that guy's leg, and he's still lying in bed. When the girl saw Ron, her pale face regained some color. She struggled. Big brother, save me. Don't worry, I won't let these people take you away. Ron said. After saying this, he stared at the youths and said, If you don't let her go, I won't be polite anymore. Hee hee, I want to see how you're going to be rude. The yellow-haired youth took out a blue magic staff from his dimensional bag. He was actually a magician. On the other side, the brown-haired youth was also prepared for battle. He pulled out a sword from his dimensional bag and stared at Ron with a smile. Ron's face sank. Grandpa Hamelin, what are the strength of these three people? Beginner warrior, beginner knight, beginner magician. Hamelin glanced at them and smiled. Don't worry, Ron. They won't be a match for you. Then I'm relieved. Ron's eyes flashed with killing intent. The blue-haired youth looked at Ron's nondescript appearance and the bone-like object in his hand. He asked casually, Hey, what do you think this guy's occupation is? The yellow-haired youth said with a smile. I don't know, but from the looks of it, I'm afraid he doesn't have much strength. Go to hell. Ron glared angrily. He decided to make the first move. They're fighting. There was no shortage of onlookers everywhere. Many people started to clamor as soon as they saw it. They were very curious as to who had the guts to actually attack the city lord's son. What's that? One of the onlookers seemed to have seen something novel, his face full of surprise. Ron chanted an incantation, and before long, skeleton warriors emerged from the ground, giving everyone a fright. What is this thing? The young men were also dumbfounded and stood there in a daze. Necromancer. He's a necromancer. The blonde youth was pleasantly surprised. It's him. He's Ron. The blue-haired youth pointed at Ron and shouted excitedly. It's him, the Ron who's wanted by the Holy See and the Holy Roman Empire. The blonde youth was also excited. If we catch him, we'll be rich. The Holy See's bounty isn't small. It's him, the necromancer Ron. I heard that in Sao Paulo, the entire city is under martial law to catch him. That's right, it's this heretic. The little girl stared blankly at Ron, as if trying to engrave his appearance in her mind. She lightly chewed on the name, Ron. Kill. Ron knew that his identity had been exposed. If he didn't make a move now, he wouldn't have another chance. The skeleton warriors charged, the giant axes in their hands viciously chopping down on the three youths. The blonde youth chuckled. Necromancer, a trashy occupation. Looks like this windfall is destined to be mine. What's going on? The blue-haired youth was shocked as soon as he clashed with the skeleton warriors. He felt a powerful force pushing him back a few steps. The blue-haired youth rubbed his aching right hand and said to the other two, "Let's go together, this guy's strong." The two youths looked at each other and let go of the girl, pouncing on Ron. "Since you want to die, I'll fulfill your wish." Ron sneered and commanded the skeleton warriors to fight with them. They were having a great time. The skeleton warriors didn't seem to be at a disadvantage against these finely dressed youths. "Are you all right?" Taking advantage of the skeleton warriors' entanglement, Ron quickly walked up to the girl and helped her up. "Thank you, big brother." The little girl's eyes reddened. She didn't think that someone would risk offending the city lord's son to save her with her status. After all, the city lord was the one who had the final say in the entire Asinara city. "You're welcome." Ron smiled, but his smile was a little complicated. From this little girl, he saw himself in the past. He was also so helpless and could only ask for a little pitiful charity from those noble youths. "Don't cry. You won't look good if you keep crying." Ron smiled as he reached out to wipe away the tears on the girl's cheeks. Rainy, don't cry." The girl wiped away her tears and smiled. The girl's feelings were pure and sensitive. She felt that this big brother named Ron was genuinely good to her and didn't mind that she was dirty at all. Ron was also a little beggar and empathized with her. Naturally, he didn't feel any discomfort. "You're Rainy?" Ron was surprised. "You don't have a name?" "My grandfather said that it was raining the day he found me, so he named me Rainy," the girl said with a smile. "I see. Then I'll call you Rainy, too." Ron smiled. "These people bullied you?" At this time, his eyes drifted to the youths, his gaze cold. Speaking of this, Rainy's eyes reddened. "They want to take me to a place. I didn't want to go, so they bullied me. Grandpa came out to stop them and was beaten up. Grandpa's body was weak, so that night, before Rainy could finish, Ron could no longer hold back his anger. The murderous intent in his eyes thickened. "These damned animals." Ron was enraged. He silently chanted a spell, and a bone spear flew out, aiming for the blonde youth's head. "Gotcha!" The blonde youth who was tangled with the skeleton warriors was no match for Ron's sneak attack. The bone spear pierced through his head, and it exploded like a watermelon. "Young master." The two youths beside him were shocked. They didn't expect their young master to lose his life just like that. The blue-haired youth turned to look at Ron, his eyes filled with hatred. "You actually killed young master. The city lord won't let you go. Die." Ron didn't bother to talk nonsense with him. The skeleton warriors behind him swung their axes, splitting him in half. The brown-haired youth instantly had a bad feeling. He knew he had bitten off more than he could chew. He turned to run. "Poochie!" A sound was heard. A bone spear suddenly shot out from behind him and pierced his heart. The brown-haired youth fell down. Ron snorted. "This way of dying is too easy for you. Brother Ron, you're so awesome. You defeated 3 bad guys in one go." Rainy's eyes were filled with admiration. "Brother Ron, can you teach me?" "Huh." Ron smiled and caressed Rainy's messy hair. Just as he was about to say something, his face suddenly changed. "Holy see." Through the eyes of the crows in the sky, he saw large groups of soldiers from the Holy Roman Empire rushing towards them like a tide. At this time, Hamelin anxiously reminded, "Ron, there are many enemies coming. There's no time to lose. Run." "Yes, Grandpa Hamelin." Ron responded and touched Rainy's head. "Rainy, Brother Ron is in trouble now. I'm afraid you'll be implicated. You'd better run as fast as you can. The farther the better." At this time, Rainy heard the chaotic footsteps and began to panic. "Brother Ron." Ron casually grabbed a handful of gold coins and stuffed it into Rainy's hand. "Go quickly. It'll be too late if you don't." Ron's expression was solemn. "I might be leaving this place soon." A grateful expression appeared on Rainy's face. She took the money and ran away quickly. After running for a few steps, she suddenly turned back and asked, "Brother Ron, where are you going?" Ron pondered for a moment and answered, "Roland Empire." "Oh." Rainy nodded and ran away. Although she was small, she was very smart. She knew that she would be a burden if she stayed. Just as Ron was fighting with the city lord's son, someone quickly reported the news of his appearance in Asinaris to the city guards. At this time, A large group of city guards rushed towards Ron's location. At the same time, a few nearby legions were also mobilized. Knowing that he was going to die, Ron calmed down. His eyes became blood red. He was going to risk it all. Let's see who's stronger. An ordinary soldier's strength was usually at the level of a trainee. As their strength increased, their military rank in the Empire would also increase. A soldier-level professional was usually a captain. A master-level professional was directly appointed as the commander of a legion. A master-level professional was like the head of the Salter family, Jalai, who was a general. A general could directly issue battle orders, and all the legions under his command would listen to his commands. Quick, surround the heretic Ron. Don't let him escape. A soldier who looked like a captain shouted. Under the command of the captain, the fully armed city guards swarmed towards Ron. They marched in neat steps, raised their shining swords high, and had cold expressions on their faces. Skeleton warriors. Ron pointed the bone staff in his hand, and a youthful fog flowed out like a dream. Immediately after, a large number of skeleton warriors crawled out from the ground one by one. He really is a heretic. Kill him. The appearance of the skeleton warriors not only did not frighten these soldiers, but instead aroused their anger. In the Holy Roman Empire, heretics were no different from devils. The hatred and anger towards heretics were deeply engraved in the bones of these city guards. Kill. Ron stood in the middle of the field, his thin and weak body emitting a powerful aura. The current him was not the same as before. He was no longer the Ron that any random noble could bully. He pointed the bone staff in his hand, and the skeleton warriors were like devils from hell. They faced the city guards who outnumbered them and launched a counterattack. Chapter 64. The skeleton hero rushed into the midst of the soldiers and swung its one-handed axe at the human soldiers. Fighting in such a narrow city was a complete mess. Ron waved his bone staff, and a large number of skeleton warriors crawled out of the ground, howling as they joined the battle. Search for the latest updates here. As soon as the city guards came into contact with the skeleton warriors, they had a bad feeling. These skeletons were too strong. When they swung their swords with Do Chi, the skeletons actually raised their shields to block. Not only did they block, but they also counterattacked. These warriors who were not afraid of death, pain, or fear became the biggest nightmare for the city guards. Damn it, didn't they say that these skeletons were weak? Why are their attacks so abnormal? Some of the city guards cursed in their hearts, but they didn't dare to retreat. Ron, the Holy See, and the Holy Roman Empire had already given them a death order. This order was to do whatever it took. If they were found to be negligent, what awaited them would be a court-martial. Ron's mind was clear. In the face of such adversity, he forced himself to calm down. After calming down, Ron erupted with powerful combat strength. In this chaotic battlefield, he was like a wise commander, mobilizing his troops to counterattack. The battle was extremely intense. Many of the city's residents were caught in the crossfire and fled one after another. Who would have thought that such a scene would actually occur in one of Holy Empire's strategic locations? It had been many years since such a scene had appeared in Asinaris. This time, there were about 100 city guards. Most of them were trainee soldiers, and a few of them were captain-level professionals. Ron had summoned more than 100 skeleton warriors in several batches, and they were locked in a fierce battle with the city guards. Whoosh, 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 boom, boom, boom. Bone spurs, bone arrows, and bone spears were summoned from Ron's bone staff. Necromancers didn't aim with their eyes, but with their souls. Ron chewed on these words and mercilessly threw them out. These bone spurs and bone arrows seemed to have grown eyes as they flew straight for the city guards' vitals. PSHHH, PSHHH. The bone spurs and bone spears pierced the bodies of the city guards, causing them to scream in pain. The soldiers who managed to avoid being hit in the vitals couldn't dodge the axes in the hands of the skeleton warriors. When the axes came down, even their bodies were cut in two. After my strength increased, even the skeleton warriors became a lot stronger. Their bodies had become much more agile. Ron thought, Compared to the first time he had summoned the dull skeleton hero, as his strength increased, the skeleton hero also seemed to have gained intelligence, and its resistance became even stronger. Agile, right? Ron suddenly thought, and a cruel smile. Right, skeleton haste, I haven't used it yet. Haste. Hee, the powerful skeleton warriors of the skeleton haste. Skeleton haste. A faint cyan light lit up and enveloped the entire battlefield. The cyan light turned into stars and fell on the skeleton hero's body. The skeleton hero's body also emitted a cyan light that resonated with the cyan light of Ron's bone staff. Oh, the skeleton warriors howled in unison, and a powerful, sinister aura spread out. The entire battlefield was filled with the aura of death, and the city guards trembled in fear. But at this time, the city guard were shocked to discover that the skeleton warriors' speed had increased by a lot. Their fighting strength had also risen sharply. Save me. Just what are these things? Why are they so strong? The battle was a one-sided victory. Under the powerful attack of the undead magic, the city guards started to crumble. No one would not cherish their own life. Once a hole was opened in the route, the consequences would naturally be terrifying. Many of the city guards fled, and Ron took the opportunity to kill them. A large number of city guards' corpses fell to the ground. After the battle, the ground was a mess. Corpses were strewn everywhere, and blood flowed everywhere. Severed limbs, brains, and intestines were everywhere. Was this all caused by me? Looking at the hellish battlefield in front of him, Ron was shocked. He also felt a trace of self-blame. Most of these city guards were innocent people. Hummelin said, "Look on the bright side, Ron. Since the day humans were born, they have always been in a life and death struggle. You have to step on the path of the strong. In the future, you will only encounter more and more of these things, not fewer." Ron took a deep breath and said, "Let's go." Asanaris' city guards had been wiped out. The remaining ones had either died or fled. He could now swagger out of Asanaris. At this time, Ron felt Hommelin's soul move. He spoke anxiously. "Ron, hurry up and leave. A large group of people is coming. Among them are pornographic novels. There are masterclass experts." "What? Masterclass experts?" Ron was startled. At this time, not far from Ron, a large number of figures suddenly flashed out. These people were wearing heavy white armor. Only their eyes were exposed. The armor on their bodies, the shields in their hands, and the huge pauldrons all had a very eye-catching symbol: Holy Cross. It was the Holy See's Holy Crusade. The Holy Crusade was the armed force with the largest number of people in the Holy See. Compared to the Holy Guardians, they were more powerful. The Holy Crusade only took orders from the Holy See. They were not under the jurisdiction of the Holy Roman Empire. A middle-aged man slowly walked out of the Holy Crusade. He was wearing a black robe and had a thick beard. He held a priest's staff that symbolized holiness in his hand. He looked at Ron with a smile in his eyes. The Cathedral of Gold's Higher Town, Father Arian. However, Arian was no longer a priest. In Mount Hygel, due to the heresy incident that had shaken the entire upper echelon, Arian had received the appreciation of Pope Ernst when he was returning Guderian's body. It was not so easy to be recognized by the Pope. The Holy See did not raise useless people. Arian had to prove his strength. Therefore, he was appointed as the commander of the Holy Crusade's Third Legion. His mission was to capture the heresy Ron. Arian was a person who was good at seizing opportunities. He knew that as long as this mission was successfully completed, Arian would be recognized by the Pope and Ernst. From then on, he would have a meteoric rise. For power, Arian looked for Ron crazily from the moment he received the order. He determined that Ron had left Sao Paulo on the first day, so he decided to pursue him all over the country. As a heresy, where would he go after committing a crime? There was no doubt that he would go to the Roland Empire. Arian guessed correctly. He ran to the border town of Asanaris without stopping. As expected, he intercepted Ron the moment he left. "Oh, you are Ron, the Ron from Maple Leaf Town. We finally meet, but I think we should have met earlier," Commander Arian said with a smile. "A master." Ron's heart skipped a beat. He knew that the master mentioned by Grandpa Hamelin was undoubtedly him. He frowned and asked, "Who are you? Why do you seem to be very familiar with me?" "Of course I am." Father Arian smiled and said, "The day after your grandfather died, I went to Maple Leaf Town to investigate you. At that time, I didn't believe that you had actually learned evil necromancy magic. Now it seems that I was wrong. However, I have to thank you. If it weren't for your appearance, I'm afraid that I would still be hiding in that godforsaken Goldtire town." "Goldtire town? You are Father Arian?" Ron was surprised. He didn't expect that the person in front of him was actually Father Arian. Father Arian was very famous in Goldtire Town. Maple Leaf Town was not far from Goldtire Town. Although Ron had never seen him, he had heard of Father Arian's name. "Oh," Arian laughed and said, "Ron, you also know me. That's great. However, I am no longer a priest. My current identity is the commander of the 3rd Legion of the Holy Crusade. This time, I came out to find you. Ron, come back to the Holy See with me. I swear in the name of God Guangming that I will not harm your life." "Oh, it sounds better than singing." Ron's heart had a trace of disdain. He had already seen the hypocrisy and shamelessness of the Holy See. He sneered and said, "Oh, in your eyes, am I not a heretic? Shouldn't I be burned to death? When did the Holy See change the law?" In the face of Ron's questioning, Arian seemed to have a well-thought-out plan. He smiled and said, "Ron, don't you understand? The so-called heresy is only targeted at ordinary necromancers, but you are an ancient necromancer. Don't you know the difference?" Ron narrowed his eyes slightly. "Ancient necromancer? What's the difference? I really don't know." Arian laughed. "Ron, if you still don't understand, then you may have heard of a term. Omroth." Arian slowly spat out the words. "Omro dash." Ron's eyes widened. At this time, he felt the soul of Hamelin's grandfather suddenly jump, and his breathing became a little rapid. He finally heard about the Omro dash. "Answer him. Say that you don't know what the Omro is." Hamelin's voice regained its calmness, and he reminded Ron. Ron shook his head and said to Arian, "I'm sorry, I don't know anything about Omro dash." "Is that so?" Arian shrugged indifferently. He was sensitive to Ron's momentary absent-mindedness when he heard the word Omro dash. He smiled and said, "Legend has it that ancient necromancers only existed in the Omro 100,000 years ago. Nowadays, ancient necromancers are extinct." Chapter 65. Arian's words corroborated with what Gordian had said. Ron was almost certain that the Holy See did know what had happened 100,000 years ago. Perhaps everything that Ron wanted to know was recorded in their secret history. Search for the latest updates here. Ask him what happened to Omroth 100,000 years ago. Why did the Scourge Church disappear? Why was necromancy lost? At this time, Hamelin's voice sounded in Ron's ears. His voice was trembling because he was suppressing his emotions. Ron lowered his head and thought for a while. He sneered, "Don't be ridiculous. Do you know what happened to Omroth 100,000 years ago? I don't believe it." Perhaps Ron's intention to provoke Arian was too obvious, but the cunning Arian immediately understood what he was trying to say. He smiled and said, Ron, it's not hard for you to know these things. As long as you follow me back to Mount Hygel of the Holy Church, we will open the secret library of the Holy Church, and you will know everything you want to know." Ron was so agitated that his face turned red. He said angrily, "Dream on." Arian spread out his hands. "Then there's no other way. Ron, don't force us to fight. If we fall out, it won't look good for either of us." You haven't done anything yet? I still remember what happened in the dark forest." Ron sneered and said sarcastically, "How is it? Have you found the body of the Holy Son, Gordian? God Guangming above, I hope he wasn't eaten by the strange beasts." Arian was not angry. Gordian, that fool, died a worthy death. To be honest, Ron, the Holy See has no ill intentions towards an ancient necromancer. His Majesty Pope Ernst also admires you. He said that as long as you follow me to Mount Hygel, you may even inherit the position of the Holy Son. He will give you the highest honor. No matter how eloquent Arian was, Ron was still unmoved. He shook his head. I won't go with you. He. Arian smiled. His face suddenly turned cold as he said indifferently, then there's nothing more to say. Ron, I hope you remember that rejecting also requires strength. After that, Arian did not waste any more words and waved his hand as he said, Go, kill. The soldiers of the Holy Crusade were the most religious fanatics. For the sake of the Holy See, they were willing to sacrifice everything, even their lives. Their name was fanatics. Great God Guangming, sitting high on the throne of glory, all things in the universe silently kneeling before your feet, holy angel, to cover my face in front of your holy radiance, all nations and people sing your praises, the grace of redemption, Almighty God. You are in charge of the human world. Nothing can change your mind. May the true God grant me strength. Destroy all darkness. At this time, the soldiers of the Holy Crusade began to sing. Their voices shook the roof tiles, but when Ron heard these songs, he got goosebumps all over his body. Holy See. The Holy Society. I remember 100,000 years ago in the continent of Amros. These guys were also so mystical. I think the Holy Society is the predecessor of the Holy See. Seeing this scene, Hamelin suddenly realized. At this time, he reminded, but Ron, you have to be careful. These guys are singing, but they are not so easy to deal with. The hymn sung by the Holy Crusade soldiers had reached its climax. At this time, something strange happened. The bodies of the Holy Crusade soldiers suddenly lit up. Their bodies emitted a holy white light, forming a shield that rotated around them. The light of hundreds of people lit up at the same time was very dazzling, making Ron a little unable to open his eyes. This was the holy blessing of the Holy Crusade. According to ancient legends, as long as there was God in the heart and was devout to God, they would receive God's blessing. This was the holy blessing. In battle, the holy blessing could effectively strengthen defense, reduce damage, and even weaken negative magic effects. It was very practical. Ron, why don't you let me enter your body and help you? This situation is different from the past. This will be a tough battle, Hamelin said with a dignified expression. Moreover, there is a master among them. His strength is at least close to level 8. Most of the soldiers of the Holy Crusade only had the strength of trainees. A few of them were junior warriors, but after the holy blessing, their strength had significantly increased. It was obvious that they were not easy to deal with. No, Grandpa Hamelin, I want to try. Unexpectedly, Hamelin's good intentions were rejected by Ron. Facing the increasing pressure of the Holy Crusade, Ron's chi was also stimulated. Ron insisted, and Hamelin could only nod in agreement. All right, be careful. Kill. Kill this heretic. Kill. 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 At this time, the soldiers of the Holy Crusade began to charge at Ron. A huge pressure hit him in the face, as if wanting to destroy everything. Skeleton warriors. Ron waved the bone staff in his hand, and the skeleton warriors rushed at the Holy Crusade like a tide. The skeleton warriors were not scary, and were much weaker than the skeleton warriors. What was scary was their numbers. Under Ron's summons, the skeleton warriors were not much less than the Holy Crusade, and even continued to increase. In the dictionary of necromancers, only numbers were everything. Only numbers could lead to qualitative changes. A large number of skeleton warriors crawled out from the ground and joined the battle. Yes, that's it. This tactic is called Skeleton C. Use the human wave tactic to overwhelm them. Hamelin shouted excitedly, as if he was the one fighting. Ron sneered, and with a wave of his hand, another wave of skeleton warriors rushed at the enemy. Damn it, these necromancers are really difficult to deal with. According to the ancient scrolls, necromancers can summon a terrifying number of skeletons. I didn't believe it before, but now I do. Arian's face was serious. It seems that I have to make a move. The Sea of Skeletons tactic wasn't something that an intermediate necromancer like Ron could do. He could summon skeletons, but to reach the level of a sea, he needed an enormous amount of soul power. This wasn't something that an intermediate necromancer could support with his current soul power. There was only one secret that Ron could use Skeleton see, and that was the soul ring. When his soul energy was depleted, he could feel a warm current from the ring, replenishing his soul. This power was not unlimited. When it reached a certain limit, the supply would stop. Purify. At this time, Arian waved the scepter in his hand, and a holy light swept across. In an instant, a large number of skeleton warriors in front of him were swept away. Apart from his skeleton warriors, many of the skeleton warriors directly fell apart when they came in contact with the holy light. What? Ron was stunned. He did not think that in front of Arian's holy light, the skeleton warriors would be so weak. It seemed that Gordian was right. The holy sea was indeed suppressing necromancy. Grandpa Homelin, I feel that his holy power is suppressing my necromancy. Ron gritted his teeth. Huamelin revealed a faint smile as he said, true restraint doesn't exist. The so-called restraint is just relative. He paused. For example, water can suppress fire. But if there is only a drop of water, how can it suppress a raging fire? On the other hand, if the fire is strong enough, it will not be a problem to directly evaporate the water. Ron suddenly understood. I understand. Strength and weakness are relative. There is no absolute strength, and there is no absolute weakness. The strong and the weak can be mutually erotic under certain rules. Conversion. That's right. Homelin smiled and nodded. The current situation is that your strength is not as strong as his. Even if he does not suppress you, you are still not his opponent. At this time, a figure rushed through the obstacles created by the skeleton warriors and suddenly appeared in front of Ron. It was Arian. He had a sinister smile on his face and shouted, Die, Ron. After that, the scepter in his hand turned into a ball of light and directly smashed towards Ron. Bone shield. Ron silently recited a spell. In front of him, a shield made of bones suddenly appeared. Boom! The shield blocked Arian's attack. Unfortunately, the power of the ball of light was not completely blocked. The bone shield burst into pieces. Ron only felt a strong surge of force. His body flew out like a kite with a broken string. He fell to the ground and could not get up for a long time. A soldier-level professional. Isn't it easy to catch him? Arian laughed. He was full of confidence in himself. He even imagined that as long as he caught Ron and brought him back to the Holy See, he would be put in an important position by the Pope. This was an opportunity for him, perhaps even the only opportunity. If he did not seize it, he would not be able to advance in this life. At this time, Ron struggled to get up and spat out a mouthful of blood. The strength of a master level is indeed worthy of its reputation. I can't even take one hit. Ron realized the gap between himself and a master-level professional. I'm sorry, Grandpa Homelin. I'm afraid you really have to come out and help me. Ron said helplessly. Homelin nodded. Well, you get ready. I'm going to enter your body now, Ron nodded. At this time, his face suddenly changed. Homelin felt that something was wrong. Ron, what's wrong with you? My head is starting to hurt. It hurts so much. Ron's face showed a painful expression. He felt as if his head was going to split open. What? Homelin was shocked. Then he seemed to remember something. This is you're going to break through? Break through? No way. At this time? Don't play with me. Ron cried. Breaking through now was not a joke. At this time, in Ron's sea of consciousness, the big ball of soul that was rotating seemed to be about to burst again. Ron had a splitting headache. He screamed crazily. Chapter 66. A large amount of soul force was concentrated. Ron clutched his head and groaned. The veins on his face were exposed. It could be seen how much pain he was enduring. His body was shrouded in a black ball of light. This black ball of light was still expanding. What? What the hell is going on? Homelin was also shocked. A breakthrough shouldn't be like this. Homelin was just a soul now. Although he knew something was wrong with Ron, there was nothing he could do. Search for the latest updates here. At this time, the strength of the skeleton warriors who were entangled with the Holy Crusaders seemed to have been sucked out all of a sudden. They fell apart one after another. The broken bones scattered on the ground, then turned into powder and drifted away with the wind. The Holy Crusade looked at each other, not knowing what had happened. His strength is steadily increasing. Is he going to break through? A thought suddenly flashed in Arian's mind. I can't let him break through successfully. Otherwise, it will be difficult to deal with him. Arian gritted his teeth. Suddenly, he raised the white, jade-like scepter in his hand high. Bullet of holy light. The scepter emitted a strong white light, and a ball of light quickly formed. Arian waved his hand, and the ball of light flew out of his hand and hit Ron. Not good, Hamelin shouted. At this time, Ron was in the process of breaking through and had no power to fight back. Hamelin was just a soul. Without Ron's body, he could not do anything at all. He had powerful strength, but he could not use it. Could it be that he could only watch as Ron was killed? At this time, a miracle happened. The black ball of light on Ron's body suddenly shone brightly and directly swallowed Arian's bullet of holy light. What? Not only was Arian stunned, but even Hamelin was stunned. Although it was a small bullet of holy light, the power contained in it was enough to seriously injure a level 6 exotic beast. Such a bullet of holy light was swallowed by Ron, who was only an intermediate necromancer. This was definitely a violation of the law of conservation of energy. Arian's eyes widened. What's going on? My bullet of holy light can actually... At this time, Hamelin smiled. It seems that Ron must have encountered some fortuitous encounter. Ron, who was inside the black ball of light, did not lose a single strand of hair. However, his consciousness gradually blurred, and he fell into a coma. Where am I? After an unknown period of time, Ron slowly opened his eyes. The moment he opened his eyes, he was shocked. Human. There were people all around him. These people were all doing the same thing, killing people. They were fighting. Yes, this was a battlefield filled with iron and blood. Why is this place so familiar? Ron quickly calmed down. He found that his body could be directly penetrated by those people. In other words, he was now something similar to a soul body. He also found that he had come to the place where he had fainted after using soul ignition. Ron's heart was full of shock. He looked at the battlefield. He did not know how long the war had lasted. There were corpses everywhere. Some were warriors in white armor, and some were knights in black armor. Their corpses were piled up together and piled up into hills. The blood on the ground had formed small puddles, and broken limbs were everywhere. The tragic situation of the war was beyond Ron's imagination. Strange. How did I get here after fainting twice? What is this place? Who are the two sides of this war? Why are they fighting? Ron's mind was full of all kinds of questions, but he could not find the answers to these questions. He could only watch helplessly. War was indeed cruel, and at this time, it was reaching its climax. A warrior in silver armor had just stabbed his long sword into the heart of a knight in black armor. In the blink of an eye, his head was pierced by a bone spear. At this time, the necromancer who used the bone spear was hit by a flame spell. His body suddenly exploded, and flesh and blood flew everywhere. On this chaotic battlefield, the same scene was repeated. Ron watched in horror. What's that? Ron's eyes were sharp. He suddenly found a shadow. This shadow was moving at an extremely fast speed. A female mage in a blue magic robe was holding a magic staff in her hand. She was constantly chanting, and magic was released from her hands, reaping the lives of the black-armored soldiers opposite her. Her eyes were filled with hatred for the enemy. At this time, her movements suddenly stopped, and the large amount of fire elements that had been gathered in her hands suddenly disappeared. Her beautiful eyes widened, and she fell weakly to the ground. Before she died, she only saw a shadow, a fatal shadow. Then, her vision turned black, and she could not see anything. She was not the only mage to suffer, and she was not the last. At this time, Ron saw many shadows suddenly appear beside the mages. The mages' team was instantly in chaos, and they fell naturally amidst the flashes of blades and blood. Screams sounded everywhere, especially ear-piercing in this chaotic battlefield. The mages also felt that it was a pornographic novel. It was not good. Undead assassin. It's an undead assassin. A man shouted in horror. What were mages most afraid of? What mages were most afraid of was a sneaky assassin. Because mages did not have strong defense, they were the best targets for assassins to kill. Before the man could finish speaking, he had no chance to speak. His head suddenly flew up, and his corpse fell to the ground with a thud. It's an undead assassin. Quick, priests, release the flares. After a moment of chaos, the white soldiers quickly calmed down, and a large number of light balls suddenly rose into the air. The light balls scattered in the sky, sprinkling down thousands of rays of light. The undead assassins were exposed one by one under the strong light, revealing their shadows that walked in the darkness. The flares themselves did not cause any damage, and their only function was to illuminate. But to an assassin, it was an extremely fatal thing. The assassins appeared one after another. Quick, kill them, don't let them escape. Avenge the mages. Angry voices rose and fell, and the assassins whose invisibility was broken fled. Some of the assassins who could not escape in time were chopped into meat paste by the angry warriors. Tragic, very tragic. Ron could not bear to see it. At this time, a large number of black shadows suddenly appeared in the sky. They were densely packed, and he did not know how many there were. What is this? Just as Ron rubbed his eyes and tried to see the things in the sky clearly, a white light suddenly flashed in front of his eyes, and then he did not know anything. A black object flashed in front of him, and this time, Ron saw it clearly. The Blood Skull flag. The border town of the Holy Roman Empire, Asinaris. Everyone held their breaths and looked at the sky, their faces showing a look of horror. The black light balls in the sky emitted a powerful destructive aura, and half of the sky was illuminated in darkness. This power was terrifyingly powerful, and it was not something that anyone on the ground could match. No, impossible. What the F***ck is going on? Arian looked at the sky in disbelief. Where did this guy get his power? How can a 15-year-old child have such powerful strength? Divine power, this is the power of God? Homelin was also stunned. How could this power of God appear on Ron? Death power, it's actually the death power? What's going on? Could it be that Ron has obtained a godhood? Or, Homelin was so excited that he trembled. It's the soul ring. This is the power of the soul ring. Ron, he has obtained a recognition of the soul ring. Even though Homelin had the soul ring for many years, he did not obtain the true recognition of the soul ring, but Ron did. Could it be that this was the choice of God? Or, Homelin did not dare to think further. At this time, Ron slowly opened his eyes and was shocked by the scene in front of him. What's going on? I'm actually in the sky. What a powerful force. What's going on with me? Ron felt that his body was filled with powerful soul force, and the strength of this force made him tremble. It's the death power. Just when Ron was at a loss, Homelin's voice sounded, "Congratulations, Ron. You have obtained the true recognition of the soul ring." What's going on? What's the death power? Ron was still confused. I'm not too sure. I've told you before, I don't know much about this ring. Homelin said, but there's one thing I'm sure of, and that is that I've always guessed wrongly. The soul ring in your hand is not some sacred artifact, but a true divine artifact. Divine artifact? Ron listened with fascination. Grandpa Homelin, is there really a God in this world? There is. Homelin answered without hesitation. I've seen it before. What exactly is a God? I can't answer that. Merlin sighed. However, what you have now is the divine power of death. This is the power of a true God. This is definitely true. The power of a God? Before Ron fainted, he had noticed that the black power in the soul ring had slightly overflowed. This power was extremely small, and if Ron did not look carefully, he would not have noticed it. He said in amazement, "This is the death power?" Homelin nodded. Don't underestimate this little bit of death power. Its power is astonishing. Grandpa Homelin, can I use this power? Ron asked excitedly. Yes. How do I use it? Use your strongest attack. Strongest attack. Ron thought for a moment. Then he slowly raised the bone staff, and the trace of death power in the bone staff quietly wrapped around it. Bone spear. Ron stood in the air, and with a wave of the bone staff, a bone spear suddenly appeared. At this time, Ron noticed that the bone spear that had always been white had turned black, and the power contained within the black bone spear caused the earth to tremble. The people on the ground looked at the sky in horror, and Ron, who was like a black sun, shining with boundless radiance. No, impossible. How can he have such powerful power? Arian, who was originally confident of victory, could not accept what was happening in front of him. No, I will not lose to you. Come, Ron, you damned heretic. You can't possibly have such terrifying power. Illusion. Everything is an illusion. Arian went crazy, and he hysterically screamed. Divine protection. Chapter 67. Spear of Death. Facing the chaotic crowd below, Ron took a deep breath and threw the bone spear in his hand, which was imbued with the black divine power of death. Bang! Ron felt a heavy blow to his chest and involuntarily spat out a mouthful of blood. Search for the latest update in the sky. A black light fell like a meteor and kept flashing in the air. Everyone's eyes were filled with fear as the powerful divine power made them unable to move. What's going on? My body, I can't move. At this time, the black bone spear fell to the ground, and an extremely powerful aura of death shrouded the earth. Time also paused for a few seconds. The air froze in an instant, and time also paused for a few seconds. Heaven and earth were silent. Boom! In an instant, a powerful force soared into the sky and let out a deafening sound. The power of the black bone spear exploded in an instant and formed a black halo. The black halo kept expanding and swallowing all the creatures on the ground. The earth also shook, and even people dozens of miles away could not stand still. What? At this juncture, Arian finally woke up. He looked at the terrifying power approaching, and his eyes widened. No. Arian waved his hand in panic, but could not stop the black halo from swallowing him. Under that power, all struggles were futile, whether they ran or stayed. The power of mortals could not resist the will of a god. This power, Ron was dumbfounded. The power of the divine power of death was too strong. He could not believe that the destructive bone spear in front of him was released by him. It was only a trace of the divine power of death, as thin as a hair, but it contained a huge power. Under the sacred domain, no one could survive. What a powerful aura of death! Hamelin exclaimed. This is not a power that mortals can have. There's actually such a secret in the soul ring. Crash! Crash! After the loud explosion, Asinaris under Ron's feet was a mess. Almost half of the city was destroyed, and the area around the center of the explosion was very neat. It was destroyed by the power of death in an instant. The remaining power of death was still wreaking havoc, and a large amount of rubble fell down, making crisp sounds. In the center of the circle, there were corpses lying on the ground. Most of them belonged to the Holy Crusade. Fortunately, the Aryans had cleared the area when they surrounded Ron, so only a few residents were affected. It was a blessing in disguise. At this moment, he suddenly lost his center of gravity and fell straight down from the air. He screamed. When Ron broke through to become an advanced necromancer, he activated his soul ring. The divine power of death within his soul ring overflowed, allowing him to fly into the air. But now, that trace of divine power of death had been used up. Without the support of divine power, he fell from the sky. He was dozens of meters in the air. If he fell straight down, he would definitely be smashed to pieces. Grandpa Hamelin, save me! Ron shouted. At this moment, he felt a soul force invading his body. Then, he felt his body become light and turned into a cloud of mist, falling straight down. After the soul force withdrew, Ron was still in shock. He patted his chest and said, "You scared me to death." "Thank you, Grandpa Hamelin. It's nothing. Quickly check your body and see if there's any problem." Homelin hurriedly said. He was afraid that the divine power of death had left some side effects on Ron's body. My soul force is gone. Ron quickly discovered that his soul force was gone and panicked. It seems that when you used up the divine power of death, you used up all your soul force. Homelin nodded and said, this is not a big problem. After a period of time, soul force can be recovered. Are there any other problems? Ron said, I seem to be injured, but it's not very serious. That's good. Homelin couldn't help but breathe a sigh of relief. My strength has already broken through to become an advanced necromancer. However, that divine power of death seems to be gone. Ron tried to mobilize the mysterious divine power of death in the soul ring, but it was in vain. It seemed that the divine power of death in the soul ring was limited. Ron asked, Grandpa Homelin, where did that divine power of death come from? Homelin shook his head, I don't know. I've said before that the soul ring is a very mysterious thing. I also don't know what kind of special effects it has. Perhaps now you know more about the soul ring than I do. After all, you've already received its recognition. Homelin smiled and continued. All right, Ron, quickly leave. Otherwise, there will be experts chasing after you. To you, the Holy Roman Empire is really not a good place. Oh, okay. Ron nodded. At this time, he glanced at the destroyed city of Athenaris and felt a little guilty. Sorry, I didn't expect its power to be so great. Ron took a deep breath. He didn't want to cause such a huge destruction. Just as Ron was about to leave, his heart moved. He said to Grandpa Homelin, wait, let me collect all the spoils of war first. The entire Holy Crusade was killed, and their equipment was scattered all over the ground. Some of the equipment, even the space bags on their bodies, were quite valuable. What Ron lacked the most now was money. He summoned dozens of skeletal warriors and commanded them to take the space bags on the Holy Crusade's bodies, pick up the weapons on the ground, and strip off the good equipment on their bodies. Nothing was spared. The dozens of skeletal warriors collected the spoils of war and handed them to Ron. Then, they turned into a pile of powder and scattered with the wind. Okay. Ron patted the bag full of spoils with satisfaction. Now, let's leave. Wait. At this time, Homelin called out to Ron again. Grandpa Homelin, what's wrong? Ron asked. Collect that guy's body. Homelin pointed at Arian's body not far away. At the moment when the spear of death descended, Arian used divine protection. Although it couldn't save his life, his body was still intact. Ron was surprised. Grandpa Homelin, why do you collect that guy's body? Collect it. It will be useful in the future. Homelin didn't explain much. Okay, Grandpa. Ron responded and quickly ran over to collect Arian's body into the space bag. He had always trusted Grandpa Homelin's words. Ron left Athenaris, which had been left in a state of disarray. 2 days later, the news of Athenaris spread to the capital of St. Paul and Mount Hygel. The entire Holy Roman Empire and Holy See were shaken. The heretic pursued by the Holy See actually killed the Holy Crusade and destroyed Athenaris in the eastern part of the Holy Roman Empire. This was no less than a slap to the Holy See's face. The Holy See couldn't sit still. On one hand, they sent more people to track down Ron's whereabouts. On the other hand, they blocked the news from the outside world. Holy See, Mount Hygel, inside the Oracle Hall. Everyone in the hall, including Pope, had a heavy expression. 9 people sat at a long square table. Except for Pope, who sat in the middle, the other 8 people sat on both sides. They were indifferent to the exquisite food in front of them. No one said a word, making the atmosphere a little dull. These 9 people were the 9 lords of the Holy See, 9 powerhouses of the sacred domain. Wherever they went, they were a force to be reckoned with. Finally, Pope Ernst broke the silence. Everyone, I'm sure you've all heard about the incident of Athenaris. How is it? Does anyone have anything to say? Is the strength of this ancient necromancer really that strong? In the Noah continent, the so-called necromancy was just a legend, but only the Holy See knew that this legend was true. This was also the reason why they were willing to kill the necromancer at all costs. However, so much time had passed that everyone had forgotten this legend. Now that those ancient scrolls were dug out and verified with each other, These Holy See bigwigs felt more and more disappointed. Ancient necromancy was actually so terrifying. In fact, there were many powerhouses in the Noah continent. Even the current Pope, Ernst, did not know why only the necromancers were regarded as heretics. This was a rule passed down from the Holy See, and everyone had to abide by it. The Lord of the Hall of Redemption, Imena, was a beautiful middle-aged woman. However, the age of a powerhouse of the sacred domain was not determined by appearance. She wore a white priest's robe, and her movements were indescribably elegant. She had the mature style of a beautiful, noble woman. She frowned and said, "Impossible." According to Arian, the necromancer called Ron is only a 15-year-old child. Does he have the strength to surpass a powerhouse of the master level? If that's the case, then he's a top genius. The Lord of the Hall of Piety, Wharton, raised his head and revealed a chiseled face. He said lustfully, "I want to take a look at the scene." The city gate of Asinaris was destroyed, and the scene was a mess. It looked like it was bombarded by a sorcerer of the sacred domain. Could he be a powerhouse of the sacred domain? As soon as the words "powerhouse of the sacred domain" came out, a layer of haze covered everyone's head. According to the rules passed down from the Holy See, necromancers were the enemies of the Holy See. However, necromancers were powerhouses of the sacred domain, so the nature of the situation was completely different. Becoming an enemy of a powerhouse of the sacred domain would be a headache even for the powerhouses of the Holy See, although they had 9 powerhouses of the sacred domain. Between powerhouses of the sacred domain, there was rarely a real life and death battle. Usually, there would be some leeway. Otherwise, if a powerhouse of the sacred domain decided to fight to the death, even if they were the stronger side, they would still have to bear a lot of losses. A powerhouse of the sacred domain? How is that possible? Imena's beautiful eyes widened. He's only a 15-year-old child. This world is too crazy. Pope raised his eyelids and glanced at Imena. Imena, how do you know that he's a child and not one of those old monsters who have lived for more than 100 years? Imena was speechless for a moment. She couldn't give any more reasons and could only keep her mouth shut. If he's a powerhouse of the sacred domain, then it'll be troublesome. Pope Ernst also felt that this matter was troublesome. He stood up with the scepter in his hand. But what makes me feel strange is that ancient necromancy magic hasn't appeared for 100,000 years. Why would it suddenly appear in the Holy Roman Empire? Don't you find it strange? Judge Nord of Guangming, the Lord of the Hall of Judgment who had been silent all this time, suddenly spoke up. Judge Nord of Guangming was in charge of the Hall of Judgment. He wore a red archbishop's robe, and his face inadvertently revealed a trace of dignity. Chapter 68. No matter what, we have to take this seriously. We can't let our guard down. Pope Ernst said. He put his hands on the table and stared at the other 9 leaders. I think that someone has to go there personally to find out the truth and capture the heretic. And this person has to have the strength of a sacred domain expert. As he spoke, Pope glanced at Guangming's consul Olaf, meaning that this was his duty and he should take responsibility. Search for the latest updates here. Olaf nodded and was about to agree. I'll go. At this time, someone interrupted. The Lord of the Hall of Piety, commander of Guangming, Wharton, stood up. His eyes flashed and he bowed to Ernst. Your Majesty Pope, leave this matter to me. I want to avenge the dead soldiers of the Holy Crusade. Ernst thought for a while and nodded. It's good for you to go. If possible, bring him back alive. Yes, Your Majesty Pope. Wharton knew that a living ancient necromancer was more useful than a dead one. Where's that guy now? Wharton turned and asked. Asinaris is an important border town. I'm afraid that he has already left the Holy Roman Empire. Olaf said. I think his destination should be the Roland Empire. Now that I think about it, I'm afraid that only the Roland Empire can protect him. Olaf continued after thinking for a while. That's for sure. Pope nodded and said solemnly, we can't let him enter the Roland Empire. If that's the case, we'll be in trouble. Those old guys in the Roland Empire are not easy to deal with. Wharton nodded expressionlessly. Calculate the itinerary. He shouldn't have entered the Roland Empire yet. There are still a few countries between the Holy Roman Empire and the Roland Empire. Between big countries, there were usually a few small countries forming a buffer zone. Otherwise, it would be easy for war to break out. If my guess is correct, he should be in Babylon by now. Boulder, the Lord of the Hall of Honor, who had been silent all this time, said, I suggest that the Holy Roman Empire send the Royal Griffin Knight Regiment to Babylon to search for him. Yes, that pornographic novel. The necromancer destroyed their Asinaris, so it's about time they did something. Wharton said with a smile. The Holy See had always acted in a domineering manner, and this time was no exception. However, they seemed to have forgotten one thing. Babylon, which bordered the Holy Roman Empire, was an independent sovereign country. After leaving the Holy Roman Empire, Ron rode the skeleton warrior for a long journey and entered the territory of a country called Barbarin. Everything was different after leaving Holy Empire. Ron could breathe a lot more freely. He could now ride on the back of a skeleton warrior without any worries. Even the passers-by and mercenaries who passed by him only revealed a slight expression of surprise. No one paid him any attention. However, no one came to question him along the way. Not a single person even looked at him with interest. Barbarin and the Holy Roman Empire had a long border. Many of the places were uninhabited. Sometimes there was not a single person in sight for hundreds of kilometers. Ron ate and slept in the open. He relied on hunting to maintain his food and clothing. Fortunately, he had stayed in the dark forest and had strong survival skills. Otherwise, it would have been difficult for him to survive. At night, in an unknown forest, Ron sat cross-legged on the ground. There was a bonfire beside him. The flames on the bonfire danced and crackled. There was a pile of chicken bones at his feet. It was obvious that he had just eaten. At this time, in front of Ron, there was a corpse. It was Arian. His face was pale, his eyes were wide open, and his mouth was wide open. He still maintained the appearance he had before he died. The time the portal bag was still. No matter how long the corpse was in there, it would not spoil. That was why it was one of the must-have items for mercenaries. When they hunted exotic beasts, they would put the corpse into the portal bag and sell it directly to the Chamber of Commerce. The Chamber of Commerce would make these corpses into various materials and sell them to the mercenaries. The entire body of an exotic beast was a treasure. Generally speaking, a complete corpse could be sold at a higher price. Unfortunately, Ron did not understand this point. He only took the essence core. Grandpa Homelin, what do you want the corpse of Father Arian for? Ron asked, puzzled. Homelin stroked his beard and asked with a smile, Ron, do you want to suddenly increase your strength? Increase my strength? Ron was surprised and happy when he heard this. What did one rely on to survive in this world? It wasn't about money or power. It was about strength. With strength, you would be respected by others. With strength, you could have everything you wanted. Ron did not get carried away by Arian's tempting idea. He thought for a while and said, Grandpa Homelin, didn't you say that cultivation must be done step by step? Any method that relies on external forces to increase one's strength is a crooked path. Moreover, there are gains and losses. Just like the undead magic, soul ignition, you have to pay a high price for gaining strength. Well, Merlin smiled. Yes, it's right to take things one step at a time. But when I say increase your strength, I'm not talking about crooked methods. 100,000 years ago, in the Calamity Church of Omros, there was a rather powerful profession. Looking at Ron's puzzled expression, Homelin smiled and blurted out, Lich, Lich? Yes, Lich. Homelin seemed to recall the past. His eyes looked into the distance and said faintly, Lich is also a branch of undead magic. They practice the art of corpse control. To be honest, I feel a little annoyed when I see those guys who study corpses all day long. But I have to admit that they are extremely powerful. Corpse control, to put it bluntly, is to control corpses to fight. According to the different levels of corpses, they can be divided into 3 levels: zombies, and spiritual corpses. Zombies have 50% of the strength of the deceased when they were alive, and their movements are slower. Zombies have 80% of the strength of the deceased when they were alive, and they are more violent and difficult to control. Spiritual corpses have 100% of the strength of the deceased when they were alive, and they are almost the same as ordinary people. Ron, think about it. This guy is a master, a level 7 Guangming priest. If he is refined into a zombie, he will have 50% of his strength when he was alive, and his strength is at least equivalent to an advanced priest. In this way, you will have a companion with the strength of an advanced priest. Won't this greatly increase your strength? The priest profession could be divided into several ranks: probationary priest, priest, Guangming priest, great Guangming priest, and holy priest. Hamelin was not wrong. Really? This can increase my strength? Ron asked in pleasant surprise. Grandpa Hamelin, hurry up and teach me. A large space was arranged in front of Ron. Inside the space, all kinds of complicated patterns crisscrossed. It was extremely complex. If someone who didn't understand magic saw it, they would be dazzled. Corpse refining formation. With Ron's current strength, he could only refine zombies. He couldn't refine corpses like zombies and spiritual corpses. Among them, the refining of zombies required the strength of a warrior. The refining of zombies required the strength of a master, and the refining of spiritual corpses required the strength of a master. As for holy corpses, it required the strength of a powerhouse in the sacred domain. The corpse refining formation was much more complicated than the forging formation that Ron had learned. Even under Hamelin's guidance, he still made 3 mistakes. It took him several tries before he could complete the magic formation. Within the magic formation, sharp bone spikes stood in a strange formation. Arian's corpse was lying in the middle. All kinds of bones crisscrossed. From afar, it looked like an exquisite work of art. Hamelin said, "The refining of corpses must be done at night. It's absolutely impossible to do it during the day. The refining time is also very particular. It usually starts at midnight. That's when the Yin energy is the thickest. If the refining fails, the corpse will also be destroyed. Only one refining can be completed in a day. However, there's no limit to the number of corpses. In other words, he could refine a lot of corpses." Ron listened carefully and said, "Grandpa Hamelin, doesn't that mean that if there's a chance, we can get more corpses of powerhouses and form a zombie army?" Hamelin said with a smile, "How can it be so easy to get the corpses of powerhouses? Moreover, once the corpse is destroyed, it can never be restored. Do you think it's your skeleton warriors?" Hamelin continued, "If the corpse is not seriously injured, it can still be restored. For example, your death entanglement can heal the corpse. If the vital part is hit, the zombie will be crippled." He paused and looked at Ron. His tone became serious. "I'm telling you seriously, the vital part of zombie is the heart. If the heart is destroyed, the zombie will stop moving. This is a secret. You must not spread it." "Yes." Ron's heart trembled as he replied. At this time, the corpse refining formation emitted a faint light. Ron was very surprised. Hamelin said, "The corpse refining formation has been activated." Bolts of lightning wrapped around the bone spikes on the ground and constantly moved around Arian's corpse, making crackling sounds. The corpse refining formation emitted a bright light and began to absorb the Yin energy in the sky and on the ground. "Now, pour your soul power into the formation core," Hamelin urged. Ron did not dare to be negligent. He pressed one hand on the formation core, and at the same time, with a thought, a steady stream of soul power was continuously poured into the formation core. At this time, Ron had broken through to become an advanced necromancer. His soul power was much stronger than when he was a junior necromancer. If his soul power was a small stream in the past, then now it was a small pond. Ron felt that his soul power was being absorbed by Arian's corpse. In a short while, more than half of his soul power had been absorbed. Arian's strength was at the master level. A mere amount of soul power was not enough for him to absorb. Ron gritted his teeth and poured all of his remaining soul power into the corpse. At this time, the corpse refining formation began to light up. Arian's corpse seemed to be supported by a mysterious force and slowly floated up. Ron was sweating profusely. At this time, almost all of his soul power had been sent into the corpse refining formation. After an unknown period of time, the light of the corpse refining formation gradually dimmed, and Ron was almost exhausted. Homelin's soul body stood beside Ron, his eyes fixed on the changes of the corpse refining formation. Suddenly, his eyebrows raised, and a trace of joy flashed in his eyes. It's done. At this time, Arian suddenly stood up, giving Ron a fright. He's moving? Ron trembled as he pointed at Arian's corpse. Nonsense. How can he fight if he can't move? Homelin reprimanded. Get up quickly. This is the first time I've seen someone frightened by their own corpse. Ron climbed up and smiled embarrassedly. Return his weapon to him. This way, you'll have one more helper. Ron returned the scepter he had seized last time. Arian took it, but his eyes were dull and lifeless like a walking corpse. Ron scratched his head and asked, how do I control it? Homelin said, you don't need to control the zombie. You just need to give the order. Take a step. Ron tried to give the order to Arian's corpse. Sure enough, Arian's corpse stretched out its leg and took a step. So that's how it is. Ron clapped his hands and laughed. He pointed at Arian and made many gestures. Arian was like a marionette. Chapter 69. It had the head of an eagle and the body of a lion. For huge claws emitted a faint glow, and a pair of huge wings grew from its back. It soared in the sky. The Holy Roman Empire's Royal Griffin Knight Regiment was composed entirely of Griffin Knights. They were the trump card of the Holy Roman Empire. They only took orders from the Emperor, and no one else had the right to mobilize them. Search for the latest updates here. Griffin was a level 6 exotic beast. It was not easy to tame it into a mount. The Holy Roman Empire had its own way of doing so. This was their biggest secret, and they would not easily reveal it to others. If not for the Holy See's request, Emperor Charles would not have been willing to send the Griffin Knight Regiment out. Whether it was Griffin or the knights on its back, they were all priceless treasures. Emperor Charles would be heartbroken if he lost one of them. 3 Griffin Knight formed a small team. They wore the same armor, and their expressions were cold. Their eagle eyes were fixed on the ground, carefully searching for traces of the heretic Ron. They had already arrived in the sky above the kingdom of Bustling. Entering the airspace of another country without warning was undoubtedly an act of aggression. However, the 3 of them were not worried about this. Firstly, they had the support of the powerful Holy Roman Empire. Secondly, a small kingdom like Bustling did not have an air force. Each of them was an elite of the Holy Roman Empire. They were all at least level 5. Otherwise, they would not have been able to join the Griffin Knight Regiment. These people had been searching for an entire night. Their faces were already showing signs of fatigue. One of them said, Captain, let's go back and rest. Look, we've been searching for a whole day. We've searched all the mountains, and we can't even find a trace of him. Yeah, Captain, even if we can hold on, Griffin won't be able to. Another person agreed. The captain took a deep breath, took off his helmet, and tidied his hair. He looked at them and said, Lord Wharton of the Holy See said that we must capture Ron. If he resists, he will be executed on the spot. He is now leading the Holy Crusade. Do you think we can rest? Captain, then. The soldier wanted to say something, but the captain interrupted him. Continue searching until we find him. Yes. The soldier could only reply. Captain, what is that? A soldier suddenly pointed at a light in the distance. The light on the ground was not obvious, but it was especially glaring in the hazy sky. The captain made a prompt decision. Yes. The 3 of them pulled the reins on the back of the griffin. The griffin made a turn in the air and flew towards the distant place where the light was shining. Grandpa Homelin, how can I bring such a huge corpse of griffin? Do I just let him follow me? After playing for a while, Ron was worried about how to deal with Arian's corpse. He could only ask Homelin. Idiot. Of course, I'll put it in a space bag or a space ring. Homelin did not expect Ron to ask such a stupid question. Isn't a space ring only able to store dead objects? But he's alive. Ron looked at Arian's corpse and said, Alive my ass. Homelin said angrily. He can move, but he's still a corpse. Go and see for yourself, if he's alive. Ron walked closer and carefully examined Arian's body. Arian's body was still cold, and he was not breathing. Hee, I saw him move, and I thought he was alive. Ron smiled embarrassedly. He stretched out his right hand, and the soul ring on his right hand shone brightly. Arian's corpse was stored in it. The soul ring also had the function of a space ring. It could store more things than a space bag. Ron would usually store valuable things in the soul ring. Not long after he left, a few griffin landed on the ground. A few figures walked down from the griffin's back. One of the griffin knight approached the bonfire and touched it. He looked up and said in a deep voice, "The bonfire is still hot. Looks like he just left. Captain, come and see what this is." A soldier of the Griffin Knight Regiment pointed at the traces left behind by Ron's corpse refining array. The captain quickly walked over and carefully examined it for a while. It looks like a magic array. The corpse refining array had already lost its effect. There was only dust left behind by the weathering of the bones. Pornographic novels. The captain flipped through the pile and took out a bone. A bone? How could there be a bone here? Could it be? The few of them quickly exchanged glances, unable to hide the ecstasy in their eyes. Looks like we found the right person. Chief Griffin smiled. Chase. The three of them quickly mounted the griffin. The griffin flapped its wings and soared into the sky, chasing after Ron. The griffin's speed was very fast. It flew in the air and had a good view. Not long after, they found Ron, who was riding a skeleton warrior on the ground. It's him. A griffin knight exclaimed in surprise. A necromancer. He's riding a skeleton. There's no doubt about it. Another said, be careful. This necromancer is not easy to deal with. Chief Griffins reminded them. Then, his expression turned serious. Everyone, get ready for battle. On the ground, Hummelin looked at the sky in confusion. Why is there a griffin in the sky? Could it be an enemy? With Hummelin's strength, he could easily discover the griffin in the sky. These griffin knights had nowhere to hide in front of Hummelin. What's that? Ron asked. This was the first time he had seen a griffin. Not good, they've caught up. At this moment, Ron's expression changed. He quickly took out the azure-grayed pig-bone staff. This was because he saw the knight insignia on the back of the griffin. Apart from the Holy Roman Empire, who else would use this kind of two-winged angel insignia? Griffin's angry roar came from the sky. When the Griffin Knight discovered Ron, he did not greet him. Instead, he swooped down and viciously pounced on Ron. Griffin's speed was extremely fast. In an instant, he was in front of Ron. Ron could even see the sinister smile on the face of the leader of the Griffin Knight. Be careful, Hummelin could not help but warn. What fast speed! Ron could not help but feel a chill in his heart. He rolled on the ground and dodged the attack of a huge lance in the hands of the Griffin Knight. Boom! Griffin's huge body landed on the ground with a loud sound and a large amount of smoke and dust. The force of the Griffin's dive, combined with its own weight, was enough to crush a person into meat paste. Ron dodged, but the skeleton warrior he was riding on was crushed into powder. If Ron had dodged a little slower, the consequences would have been unimaginable. Cough, cough. A large amount of smoke and dust covered Ron's eyes. He could not help but cough. When he opened his eyes, he finally saw the appearance of the monster in front of him. It was a monster that weighed at least 2 tons. It had a white head like an eagle's, a long beak, and 2 small bean-like eyes that emitted a fierce light. It had thick and strong limbs, sharp claws that shone with a cold light, and a huge lion's tail that swayed slowly behind its back. This was a griffin, a mutated beast griffin. An adult griffin had the strength of about rank 6. Not only was it strong in close combat, but it could also fly in the air. In addition to the elite strength of the Griffin Knight on its back, it could be said to be invincible among the warriors. For the Holy Roman Empire to send out the Griffin Knight regiment that they were most proud of, it was enough to show the importance the Holy See placed on Ron. Ron, put down your weapon and surrender, and we can consider sparing your life. At this moment, another soldier of the Griffin Knight Regiment had landed behind Ron, surrounding him as he spoke coldly. In your dreams, Ron sneered. He pointed the bone staff in his hand and silently chanted an incantation. Skeleton warriors. As Ron's soul force quickly spread out, a large number of skeleton warriors scrambled to climb up from the ground. Oomph. Stubborn. Captain Griffins coldly snorted. As a soldier, what he disliked the most was to talk nonsense. He had only tried to persuade the other party to surrender, but seeing that the other party did not respond, he immediately charged over. The captain raised his huge lance, and his body was suffused with a blue fighting aura. He was a powerhouse who trained in water-type fighting aura. Boom! A loud sound was heard. Griffin's strength was immense, and coupled with the power of his charge, he sent a skeleton warrior flying. The long, sharp lance directly pierced through the skeleton warrior's body. Ron was shocked. Even with the skeleton warrior's strong defense, it could not withstand a fatal blow from the Griffin Knight. Go to hell. The captain's face was full of murderous intent. He brandished his lance and stabbed towards Ron. The other Griffin Knight was not to be outdone and attacked Ron at the same time. Ron was surrounded from both sides. He was attacked from both front and back and was immediately in danger. Ron, use the bow in prison. Homelin timely reminded. He had rich battle experience and knew when to use what kind of magic. Bone prison. Ron did not dare to be negligent. He silently chanted an incantation, and a bone prison suddenly rose from the ground, trapping Captain Griffins in an instant. Taking advantage of the fact that Captain Griffins was unable to move, Ron quickly escaped from the encirclement. Being surrounded from both sides was not a good feeling. At this time, Hummelin cried out in alarm, "Ron, be careful behind you." Someone was ambushing him. From the corner of Ron's eyes, he saw the cold light of a sword behind him. The third Griffin Knight, who had been hovering in the air, suddenly swooped down and launched a sneak attack. The three of them were in a small group, and they had been working together for a long time. Two of them were fighting on the ground, while one of them was looking for an opportunity in the air, and when the time was right, he would kill the enemy in one blow. If not for Homelin's reminder, Ron would already be dead. But even so, Ron still could not avoid it. Bone armor. Ron quickly thought of an idea. He immediately released the bone armor to protect his body. A bone-like thing suddenly grew from his body and back, and he was covered in a gorgeous armor. Boom! The long sword behind him slashed down on Ron's body. The huge impact caused his entire body to fly out, and he rolled a few times before coming to a stop. Ron was in so much pain that he broke out in cold sweat. If not for the bone armor reducing most of the damage, he was afraid that he would already be dead. Even so, Ron was not lightly injured. Homelin became nervous. "Ron, are you all right?" Ron gritted his teeth and spat out a mouthful of blood. He struggled to get up. "I'm fine." Griffin's strength was so great that a low-level magic like the bone prison could not trap it at all. Captain Griffins waved his front claws, and the bone prison shattered. He rode out calmly on the Griffin. Chapter 70. Is that so? Ron was slightly surprised. "Why don't I think so? Since you want to die, then don't blame me." Griffin's eyes flashed. The three of them cooperated well and took a step forward. Being targeted by three huge griffin, no one would feel good. Ron's heart trembled, and he clenched the bone staff in his hand. "Kill." The Griffin squad leader spat out a word, and then the three Griffins moved at the same time, speeding towards Ron. Homelin looked serious. Ron, quickly use the zombie to fight. Zombie? Ron was startled, and only then did he remember that he had just refined a zombie. Let me see the power of the zombie. Ron thought. With a thought, he chanted an incantation and summoned Arian from the soul ring. A ray of light flashed, and from the soul ring, a black figure suddenly appeared in front of the three Griffin Knight. Father Arian stood there blankly, holding a white, jade-like staff in his hand. His expression was sluggish, and his face was gray. He was a corpse, a living corpse. The appearance of the Aryan priest gave the three Griffin Knights a fright. One of the Griffin Knights' eyes flashed with surprise. How is this possible? How did a living person suddenly come out of the space bag? Griffins looked at Aryan carefully and said, "No, he's not a living person. He's already dead." It's just a corpse. Why did this guy release a corpse? Arian slowly raised his head, and a faint green light flashed in his eyes. He stared at the three of them with an expressionless face. The three of them were shocked. This corpse can move? Everyone, be careful. Griffins looked serious. To be able to make a corpse move, it is indeed evil magic. Necromancers are indeed the most evil profession among the heretics. Evil? The corners of Ron's mouth curled up slightly, and he didn't comment on this comment. At this moment, Arian moved. Divine protection. Arian still had the combat awareness from when he was alive, and all of his combat skills were preserved. However, the power was greatly reduced. As a former Master Level 7 priest, his current strength was only at 50%, which was equivalent to that of Senior Priest. He immediately used Divine Protection, a high-level priest skill. The three of them were shocked, and one of them rubbed his eyes. No way, right? This is divine power? How could he have divine power? There's no mistaking it. It's an advanced priest skill, Divine Protection. Damn it. How can a corpse use Divine Protection? Chief Griffin's expression was solemn. Now it seems that we may have underestimated him. We don't know how this guy got his hands on the corpse of the Holy See and manipulated it to attack us. It is indeed evil magic. Burn this heretic. The other two looked even angrier. They had been instilled with the idea of justice since they were young. They hated all evil and heresy. Quamelin coldly snorted. What heresy? It's just strength. If we were in the era of the Calamity Church 100,000 years ago, let's see who would dare call us heresy. At this moment, Arian moved. He waved his scepter and attacked the three of them. The white jade scepter smashed down, and the Griffin Knight raised his shield to block it. When the two weapons collided, a powerful force exploded in all directions. Arian's scepter pressed down, and the four thick claws of the Griffin Knight sank into the ground. Hi, Senior Priest? The Griffin Knight was shocked. He did not expect an ordinary corpse to have such powerful strength. Boom! Go to hell. One of the Griffin Knight's body exploded with powerful combat energy, and he attacked Arian. Arian's body moved slightly, and he used Divine Protection to block the attack. At the same time, his green eyes flashed, and he launched a fierce counterattack. Arian's body was extremely fast, and he was not afraid of death. He was also a senior professional, but he was able to force the three of them to retreat. The fierce battle left Ron dumbstruck. This zombie warrior was really too powerful. This was equivalent to adding a high-level priest as a helper. Arian's body flashed with divine light. He was expressionless, but in the eyes of the three, he was so strange and shocking. The more they fought, the more frightened they became. They could not help but ask themselves, was this really a corpse? Were they fighting a corpse? How could this corpse be so powerful? This corpse is very strong. Everyone, be careful. Damn it, this guy is fighting with his life. Captain Griffins gritted his teeth and ordered, we can't fight separately. Let's attack together and kill it. The three of them launched a fierce attack on Arian together. Under the command of Captain Griffins, their fighting strength was quickly coordinated. This time, Zombie Arian was gradually unable to gain any advantage. Instead, he was suppressed by them. No wonder. No matter how strong Zombie Arian was, he was only a senior priest. Facing three senior knights, he did not have much chance of winning. Moreover, the opponent was not only three people, but also three tamed beasts. When the humans and beasts worked together, they could explode with powerful fighting strength. Even when Arian was alive, he might not have been able to gain the upper hand, let alone now that he was a zombie with only 50% of his strength. At the beginning, the Griffin Knight only took advantage of the opponent's fear of corpses to temporarily gain the upper hand. After regaining his senses, the Griffin Knight quickly realized that this corpse might not be as powerful as it looked. It was also not as strange as he imagined. It was similar to a senior priest battle, although the priest profession was quite difficult to deal with. Die! The captain of the Griffin squad roared as he slashed out with his flaming sword and slashed at Arian's defenseless arm. Patter! A sound was heard. Arian's arm fell to the ground silently. Ah, Ron exclaimed. This zombie took an entire night to refine. It was his first battle, and he lost an arm just like that. He suddenly felt very distressed. Arian, whose arm had been cut off, still had a blank look on his face. It was as if he did not feel any pain at all. Indeed, the dead did not feel pain. Hommelin smiled and said, Don't worry. Death Coil can heal its injury. Yes, Death Coil can heal undead creatures. Ron was overjoyed when he heard this. He silently chanted a spell and was about to release Death Coil, which could attack and heal undead creatures. But then, something strange happened. Arian raised his hand, and a holy white light instantly spread out and covered his whole body. Under the cover of his powerful holy light, his severed arm began to slowly grow at a speed visible to the naked eye. Not long after, a pure white arm completely grew out. Other than the sleeve that was cut off, the newly grown arm was no different from the one that was cut off. Ron was stunned. This is healing? He can actually use healing? Hommelin's face showed a thoughtful expression. Oh, I almost forgot that he's a priest. The three Griffin Knights were even more shocked. At this time, they realized that they were fighting a Holy Sea priest. Even if he was a corpse, he was still a priest. Griffins gritted his teeth and said, It doesn't matter. Although a priest can heal himself, using healing spells will greatly consume his divine power. I like to see how many times he can heal himself. A priest's healing spells would consume divine power. According to the plans set by the God of creation, a priest would consume very little divine power when healing others. However, if he were to heal himself, he would consume a lot of divine power. This was obviously a win-win situation. Ron looked at Arian. Indeed, Arian's divine power seemed to have been consumed. Although zombies could not breathe, Ron could still feel that his muscles were visibly contracting. What a strange way of attack. Unfortunately, it can't do anything to us, Griffins said with a cold smile. Hee. Hommelin smiled and said to Ron, A simple zombie attack is useless. Ron, you have to learn how to cooperate with zombies and skeleton warriors. Cooperate with zombies and skeleton warriors. Ron suddenly realized, why didn't he think of this before? The strength of the zombie warriors and a number of skeleton warriors combined was the way to go. After thinking this through, Ron smiled. Now, you guys have to suffer a little. Skeleton warriors attack. Ron added fuel to the fire. With a point of his bone staff, a wave of skeleton warriors drilled out from the ground and madly rushed towards the three-headed griffin army. Griffins coldly said, It's useless. These skeletons can't withstand Griffin's attack. Indeed, under Griffin's attack, the skeleton warriors could not get close to the Griffin Knight. Griffin's huge claws swung and smashed the skeleton warriors into pieces. These skeleton warriors were not skeleton warriors. They did not have armor or shields, and they did not have the strong defense of the skeleton warriors. However, they had a terrifying number of them. There were more than 30 skeletal warriors besieging the Griffin squad, surrounding the three giant beasts. No matter how strong the Griffin squad was, it was impossible to guard against them. In addition to Arian's coordinated attacks, the attacks of the three men and three beasts were quickly suppressed. The attack power of the skeleton warriors was still not bad. Even with Griffin's strong body, he could not avoid injuries under the siege of so many skeleton warriors. This time, Griffins and the other two men were secretly complaining. The leader of the three men cursed. Damn it, there are too many of these weak, undead creatures. Yeah, we can't kill them all, a Griffin Knight said gloomily as he smashed a skeleton warrior beside him into pieces. They had never felt so helpless before. Hee, aren't you guys very strong? I'll use the skeleton sea tactic and drag you to death. Ron sneered in his heart as he commanded the skeleton warriors to surround the three Griffin Knight. He stood at a distance, calm and unruffled, as if he was not involved in this matter. From time to time, he would release bone spikes to harass the three men, causing them to be in a mess and unable to guard against him. Arian was crazily attacking from the side. Holy light and holy fire were blasted towards the three men, causing the Griffin Knight to suffer greatly. No matter what, Arian's strength was greatly reduced, but he was still at the level of a high-level priest. Chapter 71. At this moment, the captain of the Griffins said decisively, "Quick, use the Griffin's evoe skill." Yes. The three of them raised their weapons, and their bodies emitted cold lightning. The controlled Griffin suddenly let out a wild cry, raising its two huge front claws and stomping down fiercely. Search for the latest updates here. Heavy strike. Boom. Three powerful lightning bolts lit up, producing a deafening sound. The three Griffins' bodies were covered in lightning, looking like three lightning balls. The powerful lightning energy wreaked havoc in all directions. The Griffin was a lightning-type exotic beast, and the strength of its heavy strike was not to be underestimated. Under that powerful and terrifying strike, the lightning spread, and the skeleton warriors around them were instantly reduced to dust, disappearing into the air. The lightning produced by the heavy strike caused the ground to crack. The world is finally peaceful. After clearing the annoying skeleton warriors in front of them, the three of them finally felt a little more comfortable. At this moment, the captain of the Griffins sneered. "How is it? Your tricks are useless against me." "Is that so?" Ron said with a cold smile. "How about another batch?" As he spoke, he pointed his bone staff, and a green fog spread out from his body. Not long after, white skeleton warriors appeared on the ground again, and there were dozens of them. These skeleton warriors' black eye sockets revealed an ominous glint, as if they were undead that had returned from hell. They howled loudly, and the sound was soul-stirring. What? The three of them were completely dumbfounded. That necromancer summoned skeletons as if they were free, killing them batch after batch. In that case, how many skeletons did they have to kill? As elite warriors of the Holy Roman Empire, what kind of battle had they not experienced? However, this was the first time they had experienced such a depressing battle. Their opponent was only one person, and he was able to toy with the three Griffin Knights. This was something that had never happened before in their career. "Captain, those disgusting skeletons are pouncing on us again," a Griffin Knight said, wiping his face. The skeleton warriors charged forward once again. They were as agile as monkeys, leaping up from the ground. Their two bony claws held onto long swords, and they ruthlessly stabbed at the Griffin Knight. "Captain, what do we do now?" The Griffin Knight was entangled by the skeleton warriors again, causing them to be flustered. The captain of the Griffins gritted his teeth and said, "Summoner, we have to kill that summoner. Otherwise, he will summon more skeletons. It's useless for us to tangle with these skeletons." The captain of the Griffin Knight said helplessly, "I know that, but if we don't deal with these skeletons, we won't be able to get close to him." At this moment, the captain of the Griffin squad thought of something. "I got it. Rise. Rise. Fight him." The Griffin squad leader issued an order, and the three Griffins flapped their wings and suddenly soared into the sky. Damn, they actually flew into the sky. How cunning. Ron could not help but curse when he understood their intentions. He was both envious and helpless. With his flying griffin, they could come and go as they pleased. If they wanted to fight, they could fight, and if they wanted to escape, they could escape. Ron could only watch helplessly from the ground. The bone spears are too close, and the bone arrows can't reach, not to mention the bone spikes. Ron pondered as he looked at the griffin flying around in the sky. Damn it, I'm actually injured. The captain of the Griffins looked at the wounds on his and the Griffins' bodies. Heartache, anger, and all sorts of other emotions gnawed at his heart. "Bombard." The captain of the Griffins gritted his teeth and ordered, "Don't care about those skeletons. Just bombard that Ron until he dies." "Yes, sir." Bombard was an attack from the sky to the ground. As a lightning attribute exotic beast, the Griffin could release lightning balls the size of a human head and bombard the ground from the sky. There was a lesson in the Griffin's training. Why aren't they leaving yet? Ron thought they were going to escape from the sky, but realized that they were turning back. At this moment, his eyes widened. What's that? Boom! A lightning ball exploded beside Ron. Lightning scattered in all directions, and the power of the lightning ball gave Ron fright. Homelin said anxiously, "Not good, Ron. They're going to bombard from the sky. Dodge." Boom! 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 The lightning balls fell like raindrops, exploding on the ground and creating a large crater. Not only that, after the lightning balls exploded, lightning scattered everywhere, and those who were grazed by them felt numb. Damn it! The lightning balls fell like raindrops, making Ron so angry that he vomited blood. He was charred black by the lightning, and his hair stood on end. He raised a huge bone shield, blocking the lightning balls that fell one by one. However, the bone shield couldn't hold on much longer. The skeletal warriors stayed on the ground, completely useless. Ron rode on the skeletal warriors and cast a haste spell on them, making them run for their lives. However, in front of the Griffin Knight, who had the advantage in the air, how could it be so easy to escape? The other party caught up with him easily, and those lightning balls came crashing down as if they had eyes. It's over. It's over. There's no way to escape. Ron cried bitterly in his heart. The Griffin Knight's strength wasn't just for show. In a situation where they had the advantage in the air, he didn't have the strength to retaliate at all. He couldn't even escape. "Grandpa Homelin, is there any necromancy spell that can make me fly? If this goes on, I'll be finished." Ron shouted at Homelin for help. "A necromancy spell that can make you fly." Homelin shook his head. "There really isn't any, unless you have the strength of a grandmaster, which is the realm of a grand magus." "Then aren't I finished now?" Ron was a little depressed. The feeling of being suppressed and unable to retaliate was a little uncomfortable. That might not be the case. Didn't you learn a necromancy spell 2 days ago? It's called Skeleton Magus?" Homelin said with a smile. "That necromancy spell can deal with them?" Ron was surprised and happy when he heard this. With the range of the spell, it should be possible. Ron was speechless. "Why didn't you say so earlier?" Homelin spread out his hands. "I thought you would remember." There was no time to bicker with Grandpa Homelin now. Ron tapped his bone staff lightly, and a strong soul force was released. He was going to use the pornographic novel that he had learned 2 days ago when he had broken through to become a high-level necromancer. It was the Skeleton Magus that he had learned. Not long after, more than 10 Skeleton Magus crawled out from the ground. Ron took a closer look. The Skeleton Magus looked very similar to the Skeleton Warriors. The only difference was that they held a short magic staff in their hands, and their bodies were not covered in bone armor. Instead, they wore tattered mage robes, as if they had been picked up from a garbage. Skeleton Magus, blast them away. Ron did not have time to think too much. Regardless of whether the Skeleton Magus could deal with the Griffin Knight, he immediately gave the order to attack. At this moment, the Skeleton Magus seemed to come alive. The green flames in their eyes lit up, and they raised their heads together, staring at the few Griffin Knights in the air. He seems to have summoned something again." A Griffin Knight said in surprise. "Isn't it just those skeletons? It's useless no matter how many of them there are." Captain Griffins said with a cold smile. "Let's work harder and send this heretic straight to hell. Then, we'll bring his corpse to Lord Wharton to receive our reward." "Yes." Seeing the Griffin Knight getting closer and closer, Ron clenched his teeth and pointed with his bone staff. "Release." The Skeleton Magus obeyed the order and waved its magic staff. In an instant, magic spells shot up like cannonballs. Boom, boom, boom. In the sky, green, blue, yellow, and white magic spells of all kinds exploded in the air, like a beautiful fireworks show. Griffins and the other two were completely stunned. They did not expect that there would be such a large number of magic spells on the ground. What were the knights in the air most afraid of? It was undoubtedly magic attacks. Perhaps the strange beasts would not be killed immediately if they were hit by magic, but they would die if they fell. What the hell? Why are there so many magicians suddenly appearing? Captain Griffins said in shock. There are all kinds of magic spells. Damn it, did we encounter a magic army? It's those skeletons. They can actually release magic. We miscalculated. As the Griffin Knight spoke, A few magic bullets had already landed. Griffin, who was under him, screamed in pain. He was so scared that his face turned pale. "We can't take it anymore. Let's go. We'll be finished if we continue fighting," Captain Griffin said with gritted teeth. He looked at Ron on the ground unwillingly and turned around to fly away. "You want to leave now? It's not that easy." Ron sneered in his heart. He waved his bone staff. "Skeleton magicians, come out." Another group of skeleton magicians appeared in front of Ron. Ron pointed his bone staff in the air. "Blow them up. Don't give me any face." Boom, boom, boom. More and more magic bullets rose and exploded in the air. The sky was like a blooming flower, with all kinds of magic spells shining continuously. All kinds of beautiful magic spells danced in the air. Now, it was the turn of the Griffin Knights team to flee. Once you break through and become a high-level necromancer, you'll be able to summon skeleton magicians. Skeleton magicians are the symbol of a necromancer going from weak to strong. Hummelin laughed. He glanced at Ron and continued. "Once you summon skeleton magicians, you won't be at a disadvantage no matter what profession you face in the future." Griffin, who was in the air, was seriously injured by Ron's skeleton magicians. The knights riding on Griffin's back were even more frightened. One had to know that they couldn't fly. Once what they were afraid of happened. One of the Griffin, tilted his head and fell down. Boom! Griffin fell down in an extremely graceful manner. When he landed on the ground, a loud sound was heard. Griffin and the knight were instantly turned into minced meat. No one could survive such a powerful impact. Although Griffin was incomparably strong in the air, there was only one outcome for falling down after being hit: death. Skeleton magicians are indeed powerful, Ron exclaimed in his heart as he looked at the beautiful magic spells that were like fireworks in the air. At this moment, the other Griffin, who had been hit in the abdomen by a flame spell, could no longer hold on and fell down like the former. Chief Griffins tried his best to maintain a calm face, but his heart was already in turmoil. This was necromancy magic. This was necromancy. No wonder the Holy See saw him as a thorn in their side. A heretic with such strength was definitely not a blessing for the Holy See. Chief Griffins was slightly luckier than the other two guys. Griffin's vital parts were not directly hit by the magic spells released by the skeleton magicians. He was lucky enough to escape with his life. Chapter 72. There were many mountains in the kingdom of Babarin, and it was known as the Kingdom of Mountains. The average altitude of the entire kingdom was more than 2,000 meters above sea level. The mountains were high and the forests were dense. It was not easy to find a single person. Among the winding mountains, a group of about 10,000 people was traveling through the mountains. They wore thick armor and rode on white warhorses. The most eye-catching thing was that their bodies, shoulders, and shields were all embroidered with a red cross. Search for the latest update here. These people walked forward expressionlessly. Even the falling rocks from the mountain didn't cause them to blink. The Holy Crusade of the Holy See. Just by looking at their uniform, one could tell that they were the best of the best. The leader of the group was also riding a white horse. He was also wearing the uniform of an ordinary soldier. Other than the holy angel statue on his body, there was nothing special about him. However, every soldier who walked to his side would stand at attention and salute him. Their actions were meticulous and respectful. Reporting. The 5th team has not found any traces. Reporting. The 7th team has not found any traces. Reporting. The 9th team has not found any traces. Teams of Griffin Knight descended from the sky and walked to the leader's seat. They respectfully knelt down and reported the latest news. The one riding on the white horse was the Lord of the Holy See's Hall of Piety, the commander of the Holy Crusade in Guangming, Wharton. He was born in the military. He climbed to the position of Lord of the Hall of Piety with his own strength and ability and became one of the 9 leaders of the Holy See. Even as a strong person in the sacred domain, Wharton did not have the habit of being arrogant and had always maintained the character of soldier. With his strength and status, he did not have to do everything personally. Generally speaking, When Griffins went out to scout, they only had to report the situation to their commander, and the commander would then report back to him. Wharton, on the other hand, was different. He would personally meet every single member of the Griffin squad and carefully listen to their reports. He would even ask for some details. Wharton's memory was very good. He could clearly remember every single member of the Griffin squad. He could even recall the names of the Griffin Knights. Search again. After listening to Griffin's report, Wharton's frown deepened. They hadn't found any trace of Ron for a few days. As time passed, the difficulty of the search gradually increased. The Royal Griffin Knight Regiment belonged to the royal family of the Holy Roman Empire and did not belong to the Holy See. However, none of these Griffin Knights disobeyed Wharton's orders. Wharton had borrowed the Royal Griffin Knight Regiment and treated them like his own soldiers. Prestige. That's right. The key to Wharton's command of the Royal Griffin Knight Regiment was prestige. Even in the Holy Roman Empire, Wharton, who came from a Holy See, had a strong influence. It could be seen from the sincere admiration in the eyes of the soldiers. Another reason was that Wharton was a strong person in the sacred domain. A strong person in the sacred domain represented the pinnacle of humanity. On the Noah continent, every strong person in the sacred domain would receive respect. This kind of respect even existed among the strong people in the sacred domain. These Griffin Knights carried out Wharton's orders to the letter. It was not difficult to understand the fanatical look in their eyes. On the Noah continent, strength was respected. Yes, the Griffin Knight respectfully performed a standard military salute and replied loudly. He quickly mounted Griffin, and the Griffin flapped its wings and soared into the sky. Sigh. Looking at the Griffin in the distance, Wharton took off his helmet and stretched out 2 fingers to gently rub his eyes. His annoyance was obvious. At this moment, a middle-aged man with chestnut-colored hair saw this scene and said to Wharton, "Sir, there is no need to be so worried. With Sir personally taking action, and with the Griffin's help, this Ron will definitely be caught. Do you think he can fly to the sky? Besides, he's just a necromancer. Even if he escapes, he won't be able to make any big waves." The person who spoke was called Diallo. Although his appearance was similar to Wharton's, he was Wharton's student. Their relationship was that of a superior and subordinate. Diallo was also a genius. His strength had already reached the master level, and he even had the chance to become a strong person in the sacred domain before the age of 60. He was deeply loved by Wharton, who regarded him as a confidant. Wharton shook his head. "You don't understand. The original strength of a necromancer is not as simple as you think." Wharton's face turned solemn as he recalled the scene of devastation in Asinaris. He had always been uncertain about Ron's strength, and it was precisely because he was uncertain that he was worried. Was his strength at the warrior level, master level, or master level? Wharton fell into deep thought. Looking at the extent of the destruction in Asinaris, he would not be surprised if it was done by a strong person in the sacred domain. He could also do such destruction. Could it be a sacred domain? No way, right? A 15-year-old in the sacred domain. No one would believe it. Could it be that he has surpassed the sacred domain? Thinking of this, Wharton could not help but laugh. If that Ron really had the strength to surpass the sacred domain, then he would not have to run. He could go wherever he wanted. Why would he waste so much effort? The two suddenly fell into silence. Wharton did not explain much about this matter, and Diallo did not ask further. At this moment, Diallo suddenly felt like he was reading a pornographic novel. He thought of something and said, "My lord, we are already dozens of miles into the kingdom of Bobelin. If we continue like this, we will reach a major city in the kingdom of Bobelin." I'm afraid Diallo was indeed a little worried. If there were only a few people, it would be called illegal entry. If there were many people, it would be called invasion. After all, he had more than 10,000 Holy Crusade soldiers and the Griffin Knight Regiment behind him. This scale was enough to destroy a small country. If they were discovered, it would be equivalent to a declaration of war. Even if they did not declare war, it would easily cause diplomatic friction. Wharton frowned. I remember that the kingdom of Bobelin doesn't have a protector, right? A protector referred to a sacred domain expert. This was because only a sacred domain expert could provide the necessary protection to a country. Even if a large country faced a small country with a protector, it would not go too far out of respect for the sacred domain expert. If a small country did not have a sacred domain expert to protect it, it would be miserable. Take Ebia, for example. The original sacred domain expert had died, and there was no other sacred domain expert to protect it. Only then did the Holy Roman Empire dare to invade and annex it. There seems to be one. Diallo thought for a moment and said, "But I heard that he has been missing for more than 10 years. Only one? He has been missing for more than 10 years? Wharton laughed. Then what are you worried about? If there were a few sacred domain experts, it would be a little troublesome. What kind of threat would a missing sacred domain expert pose to the powerful Holy See? Of course, Wharton did not think much of it. Yes, my lord is wise. Diallo laughed. By the way, what is the name of the sacred domain expert? Wharton thought for a moment and asked. Diallo could not remember, so he answered honestly, I'm sorry, my lord. It's been too long. I don't remember. Wharton said, Oh, it's fine. Since you can't remember, then forget it. Every sacred domain expert had their own sphere of influence. This sphere of influence generally referred to countries, organizations, families, and so on. The sphere of influence of a sacred domain expert was not to be invaded by others. Even if it was a sacred domain expert who wanted to invade, they had to pay a price. They had to be prepared to fight to the death with another sacred domain expert. Needless to say, those below the sacred domain expert would not even know how they died if they offended a sacred domain expert. It was precisely because of the existence of saint-level combatants that a country could develop peacefully. Therefore, some small countries did not hesitate to beg saint-level combatants to be their country's protectors. Money, power, beauties, as long as a saint-level combatant asked for it, they would eagerly hand it over. There is only one condition: to be protected. Of course, this money was not given for free. After receiving the money, they naturally had to help. As the protector of the sacred domain expert, the sacred domain expert would solve their problems. Small problems naturally did not require the help of a sacred domain expert. What the sacred domain expert needed to deal with were the challenges of other countries' sacred domain experts. Small countries with a sacred domain expert in charge would be able to sleep peacefully as if they had eaten a tranquilizer. In a country like Babarin, as the protector of the sacred domain expert, Wharton would not take it seriously. If he was unhappy, he could just order his army to destroy the country the next day. No one would say a word. Under the influence of the Holy See, who would dare to act recklessly? At this time, a lion's roar came from the sky. Wharton looked up. It turned out that another griffin had returned. However, this griffin was flying in a crooked manner. It did not have the majesty of the king of the sky at all. Wharton was immediately displeased. He thought to himself that a guy like this who did not care about military rules should be given a good scolding. When the griffin landed on the ground, Wharton was shocked. He saw that the griffin was covered in wounds. Some of the wounds were so deep that his bones could be seen. His beautiful and mighty fur was burnt. The armor of the knight on the griffin's back was also broken, revealing his muscles that were full of scars. He looked as pathetic as he could possibly be. The one who had returned was the captain of the griffins who had fought with Ron. He rolled down weakly and knelt in front of Wharton. Isn't there supposed to be 3 people in your team? Where are the other 2? Wharton frowned. What happened to you guys? You look like you were attacked by a large number of spells. Did you encounter the Magician Legion of Babarin? No, sir. Captain Griffin was injured and had struggled all the way back. At this time, he could not speak clearly. I met Ron. Wharton and the other experts of the Holy Crusade heard this, and their eyebrows gradually relaxed. It was as if a ray of light had suddenly appeared in the dark night. After searching for several days and nights, they finally found news of Ron. How could they not be overjoyed? Where did you meet him? Where is he now? Diallo was surprised and happy. At this time, he glanced at the wounds on the griffin's body and asked hesitantly, This was not done by him, right? When he asked this question, Even Diallo himself could not believe it. For the first time, the Griffin squad leader nodded. There was a trace of unwillingness in his eyes, but he still answered honestly, "Yes, sir, this guy is very strong. I don't know where he summoned a whole team of skeletons that could cast magic. We were flying in the sky, but they blasted us down. 2 of my subordinates died in battle, and even I..." Chapter 73. What? Impossible. Diallo's face was full of disbelief. Is what you said true? It's true. The one who answered was not Captain Griffin's, but Wharton, the commander of the Holy Crusade. He nodded expressionlessly. It's true. The ancient necromancers were so powerful. Their strange and terrifying necromancy and endless attacks made it impossible for you to guard against them. As he spoke, Wharton slowly raised his head. 100,000 years ago, the Holy See was just a small force, but the necromancers who practiced necromancy were already the largest force on the mainland. Their name was the Scourge Church. Diallo sucked in a breath of cold air and asked, "So the legend of the necromancer is true? My lord, where did you get this information from?" Wharton paused for a moment. "The secret library of Mount Hygel. Before the battle, I specially went in to search for books and information about necromancy. My efforts paid off. I finally found these books. In the 5th volume of the Ancient Scrolls, it was recorded that 100,000 years ago, the mainland was ruled by the Scourge Church of the Undead. As they became more and more unpopular, the whole mainland was angry and resentful. Therefore, the Holy See took the lead in resisting and blew the horn of the Holy War. A great war was about to break out. The war lasted for 7 years. The Holy See finally defeated the Scourge Church, and the mainland ended the dark reign and finally returned to Guangming. Everyone listened quietly and did not even breathe. With their status, they would never have the opportunity to hear such a secret. Wharton's gaze slowly swept across everyone's faces, and he said in a low voice, "Do you think that the gap between the human race and the orcs, elves, and magical beasts is too big?" No one answered. Their answer was written all over their faces. Compared to humans, the elves and the beastmen were much stronger. For example, the beastmen who lived in the alpine regions were much stronger than humans. A 2-year-old beastman child could already beat an adult human to a pulp. As long as a beastman reached adulthood, they would not need to train to become a qualified warrior. Not to mention, the beastmen also had a variety of combat skills. With their strong physique and powerful combat skills, the beastmen were much stronger than humans of the same level. Needless to say, the elves had super strong magic talents that made it difficult for humans to keep up with. Wharton smiled. According to the 5th volume of the Ancient Scroll, 100,000 years ago, it was the Scourge Church that oppressed the orcs, elves, and magical beasts. At that time, no one dared to disobey the orders of the Scourge Church. The words of the Scourge Church were the orders of the people. Everyone sucked in a breath of cold air. A human force could actually suppress the orcs, elves, and magical beasts, making them bow their heads and listen to orders. How powerful was that? The orcs, elves, and magical beasts were born with innate talent. 100,000 years ago, they were naturally a higher race. What was a higher race? It was a comparison of the strength of different races at the same time. The stronger the race, the higher the rank. Under the same conditions, a 10-year-old human boy would not be able to defeat a 10-year-old orc boy. This was the innate advantage of a higher race. It was something that a lower race like the human race could not compare to. Generally speaking, magical beasts had the highest innate talent, followed by elves, orcs, and humans had the lowest. It could be said that humans with weak bodies and average elemental affinity did not have any innate advantages. In comparison, the higher races had more prominent advantages. 100,000 years ago, during the era of the Scourge Church, humans, as a lower race, had actually suppressed magical beasts, elves, and orcs who were higher races to the point that they could not move. What kind of world was this? The word suppression could not be used carelessly. In this world where strength was respected, there was no need to talk about suppression if one did not have a certain amount of strength. It was already good enough that they did not destroy you. In the eyes of the average human, it was impossible for humans, who were born without any advantages, to achieve this. This thought flashed through everyone's minds. Could it be that the human race 100,000 years ago was also a higher race? After Wharton finished speaking, everyone fell into silence. They were deeply shocked by what they had heard. What are you all worried about? After a long silence, Diallo actually laughed, but his smile was a little forced. Even if necromancy and the Scourge Church were powerful, weren't they still destroyed by the Holy See? Diallo said with a smile. Doesn't this also prove that the Holy See is more powerful than the Scourge Church? After hearing Diallo's words, everyone felt relieved. After all, necromancers were their enemies. No matter who it was, they would not feel very comfortable hearing that their enemy was powerful. Diallo looked at Wharton, as if asking for his opinion. Wharton thought for a moment and sighed. Diallo, what you said is not without reason. But in the records of this ancient scroll, there are many things that are not described in detail. Whether these things are true or not, and what happened at that time, there is no way to verify. I've been thinking, in the history of the Holy See, was there such a powerful existence? Wharton shook his head. Even during the heyday of the Holy See, we were only on equal footing with the other higher races. We were far from the time of the Scourge Church. This. Diallo's tone became hesitant. Perhaps our ancestors were too powerful, and we, as the younger generation, failed to live up to their expectations. It is said that the strength of humans is much weaker than in ancient times. Wharton shook his head and waved his hand. Let's not talk about this anymore. No matter how powerful the Scourge Church and necromancers are, they cannot change the fact that they are heretics, the embodiment of evil. They stand on the opposite side of justice and are destined to perish. Wharton's eyes shone brightly. No matter where he escapes, we will destroy him mentally and physically. This is our mission and also our mission. These words made everyone's blood boil. Everyone put their hands on their chests and knelt on one knee, loudly saying, "We obey your orders, my lord." Wharton waved his hand, took a deep breath, and suddenly landed. Let's go. The green grass was faint, and the cool breeze blew gently. After the bitter winter, the earth was once again filled with vitality. At a glance, it was a scene of spring. A simple building suddenly appeared in the midst of the green grass. The mercenary station. The mercenary station was a place for mercenaries to rest and eat. They were usually located on the roads between cities, and when the mercenaries saw such a building, they felt as if they had found a home. Indeed, the mercenaries who had been wandering for many years did not have a fixed place to stay. The mercenary station could be said to be the mercenaries' warm home. There was everything they wanted here. Exquisite food, comfortable beds, and beautiful women. Let's rest here for a while. After walking for half a day, Ron was tired, thirsty, and hungry. When he saw a tavern-like place appear in front of him, a smile appeared on his face, and his mood improved. As soon as Ron walked in, a pungent smell of sweat drifted over. He focused his eyes and saw that the simple 10 or so tables inside were almost full of people. It seemed that the business of this tavern was good, Ron thought. The seats on the first floor were already full. Ron looked for a seat on the second floor and sat down. Not long after, a waiter came up to him and said with a smile, "Hello, sir. This is the mercenary station. What would you like to order?" Ron casually ordered a few things, and the waiter noted them down one by one. After a while, he said, "Sir, 5 gold coins." So expensive? Ron was shocked by the price the waiter reported. According to his understanding, those things were only worth a few silver coins. Ron felt a little heartache and immediately asked, Can the price be cheaper?" The waiter had a professional smile on his face. "I'm sorry, sir. We have pornographic novels. The price of this mercenary station is the same in the whole continent." "So it's like this." Ron helplessly nodded and threw down 5 gold coins. "Okay, sir. please take out your mercenary badge and register it. The waiter took the money and said with a smile, I need this thing to eat. Ron stared with his eyes wide open. His face showed an inconceivable expression. He shook his head and said, I'm sorry, I don't have this thing. Oh, so sir is not a mercenary. When the waiter heard this, his face immediately turned cold. He stiffly said, Then I'm sorry, sir. According to the rules of our mercenary union, non-mercenaries who come to the mercenary station to eat will be charged double the price. That is to say, sir, you have to pay 10 gold coins. What? You want to increase the price? Ron almost jumped up when he heard this. 5 gold coins was already expensive enough, and now people who were not mercenaries were charged double the price. This was simply daylight robbery. These 10 or 20 gold coins were nothing to some mercenaries, and Ron could afford it. However, he had always been thrifty, and he couldn't wait to split a gold coin into 2 halves. The waiter's face turned cold, and he obscenely said, Sir, our mercenary union's rules are like this. After all, our mercenary station only serves mercenaries. Out of consideration for humanity, we also accept non-mercenaries to eat here, but the price is double. Sir, if you don't want to eat here, please leave. The commotion here attracted the attention of the surrounding mercenaries. They saw the waiter of the mercenary station arguing with a non-mercenary, and a trace of threat swept over. Okay, I'll pay. Ron helplessly took out 10 gold coins from his space bag and threw it on the table. At this time, he was starving, so no matter how expensive it was, he could only pinch his nose and accept it. Even after receiving the money, the waiter's eyes were still cold, completely different from the previous enthusiastic look. Ever since he knew that he was not a mercenary, the waiter did not give him a good face. TSK, what's the big deal? Isn't he just a mercenary? Sometimes I also do a few things and become a mercenary. Looking at the waiter's back, Ron felt indignant. At this time, an old voice entered his ears. Chapter 74. Ron turned his head and saw a bald man standing in front of the table. He was wearing tattered clothes with a few conspicuous patches on them. There were only a few strands of hair on his smooth, bald head. He held an old felt hat in his hand and smiled as he extended it to Ron. He even shook it gently twice. It was unknown how long it had been since the felt hat was washed, but it was covered with oil stains. A pungent smell of alcohol drifted into Ron's nostrils. He could not help but frown. The old man's face was red from the alcohol, and he was swaying as he walked. It seemed that he had indeed drunk too much. Search for the latest updates here. Seeing that Ron did not respond, the old man shook the hat in his hand again. Little brother, give me some money. The gods will bless you. Seeing this gesture, Ron understood that the old man was a beggar. Ron often saw this gesture from his grandfather. Suddenly, a familiar feeling welled up in his heart. Without saying a word, he took out 20 gold coins and put them all on the old man's worn-out felt hat. He said, Here you go. Huh. The surrounding mercenaries who saw this scene gasped. They had seen generous people, but they had never seen such a generous person. Who was that old man? He was just a beggar. This guy actually gave him 20 gold coins at once. What was the concept of 20 gold coins? It was enough for an ordinary family to live for a year. At this time, the mercenaries looked sideways at Ron, sizing him up. Some of the unscrupulous mercenaries had already secretly estimated his strength and were preparing to attack him. The old man was obviously stunned for a moment. He quickly took back the felt hat and put the 20 gold coins into his pocket. As if he was afraid that Ron would snatch the money back, he smiled and thanked him, turned and left. Oh, what a pity. What a pity. A mercenary next to him shook his head and said. He deliberately raised his voice so that Ron could hear. Sure enough, Ron turned his head and asked, Big brother, what's a pity? The mercenary's face showed a trace of an unfathomable smile. Ha ha, little brother, I'm saying that your money is a pity. Do you think that guy is a beggar? Ha ha, calling him a beggar is not wrong. But all the money he begged for was used to buy wine. He is a complete drunkard. Your 20 gold coins are guaranteed to be spent in a short time. So, little brother's money is a pity. After saying that, He shook his head with an expression that said, "You lost money." Ron was speechless for a moment. "Oh, so it's like this." The old man quickly ran to the counter, threw the 20 gold coins on the counter, and shouted, "I want all of it to buy wine. I want the best red rose wine here." 20 gold coins could buy a lot of inferior yellow rice wine, which could last for 10 days or half a month. However, if he wanted to buy red rose wine, he could only buy about 1 kilogram. It could be seen that this old man was a person who loved to enjoy himself. Of course, this referred to wine. What a guy who loves alcohol as much as his life. And I don't know what kind of dog shit luck he has. The surrounding mercenaries began to talk. The old man bought the wine and asked the waiter to put it in an ordinary bottle that he had brought. He didn't find a table to sit at, but went to a corner of the tavern, lay down on the ground, opened the lid, and drank the wine happily. He had exchanged all his money for wine and didn't even have the money to buy food and wine. Ron noticed that next to the old man, there was a tattered bag. Next to the bag, there was a rusty iron sword. Even if it was thrown on the street, no one would pick it up. This old man is a bit strange. Although he is a mercenary, no one has seen him do any tasks. Every day, he holds a worn-out felt hat and begs everywhere. That guy also sold his mercenary metal as wine. If the waiter here was not familiar with him and knew that he used to be a mercenary, they would have charged him double the price. The mercenary's discussion drilled into Ron's ears. "I actually gave my money to a drunkard who drinks wine like his life." Ron was somewhat helpless. He had never seen a beggar spend money like this. 20 gold coins were gone in the blink of an eye. They were all exchanged for wine. If it was Grandpa Zachary, after receiving a big reward from a patron, he would definitely hide the money and only use it when he needed it. That's not right. Hamelin looked at the old man's figure. He frowned and revealed a thoughtful expression. "I don't know why, but I feel that this guy gives me a dangerous feeling." Dangerous feeling? Why is that? Ron was a little surprised. In his eyes, Hamelin was an omnipotent expert. This was the first time Ron heard Hamelin speak to him in such a solemn tone. "I don't know the specifics, but he seems to have used some method to hide his strength." Hamelin took a deep breath. "I hope I guessed wrong." The waiter had already brought up the hot food. Ron ate while chatting with Hamelin. From time to time, his eyes would glance at the old drunkard. Hearing Hamelin's words, Ron took note of him. However, he couldn't see anything strange about the old man. He was a very ordinary drunkard, no different from the drunkards he had seen before. He was holding a shabby wine bottle in his hand, which was covered with stains and dust. Inside the wine bottle was an expensive red rose wine, which looked very incongruous with the wine bottle. The wine that the nobles drank should be kept in exquisite glass bottles and placed on the spotless table in the banquet. On the table, there should be several goblets. The beautiful maid would pour the red rose wine, which was as red as blood, into the bright goblets and serve them to every guest. The guests gently swirl the goblets, smelling the fragrance of the red rose with their noses and tasting it with the tip of their tongues. But now, it seemed that such a precious wine was simply wasted in the hands of the old drunkard. Ordinary nobles wouldn't be willing to drink such a precious wine, let alone mercenaries who had been wandering for a long time. The old man's behavior attracted the attention of many mercenaries. At this moment, the door opened with a bang. Then a large group of people rushed in. These people were wearing white battle robes and white armor. A bright red cross was pinned on their chest. It was very conspicuous. It turned out that the Holy Crusade of the Holy See had arrived. Who is it? Who dared to cause trouble at the mercenary station? The mercenaries stood up and looked at each other. Although the mercenary station was small, it represented the mercenary union, and the mercenary union represented the interests of the mercenaries. Offending the mercenary union was the same as offending all the mercenaries on the continent. Who would do such a stupid thing? The well-trained Holy Crusade immediately took up various advantageous positions as soon as they entered the tavern. In a moment, they controlled all the corners and vantage points. Every one of them held a sword in their hands. Their expressions were cold and murderous. If anyone dared to act rashly, no one would doubt whether their sword would come down. Some of the mercenaries wanted to resist. After all, they were all powerful and used to licking blood on the blade. But when they saw the regular army, they hesitated. Pada! Pada! The teams of Holy Crusade continued to move in. Not long after, the entire mercenary station was surrounded. It was as airtight as an iron bucket. What's going on? Who are they? How dare they surround a mercenary station? Are they not afraid of the mercenary union? A mercenary whispered, "Look at their attire. They seem to be the Holy Crusade of the Holy Roman Empire." A mercenary who was blind and won, I said. Damn, aren't we in the Barren Kingdom? How can we see the Holy Crusade of the Holy Roman Empire? Another mercenary said, Roar, roar, pornographic novels at this time. The roar in the sky attracted the attention of the mercenaries. The pupils of the mercenaries shrank. Griffin, a large group of griffin was circling in the sky. These mercenaries knew that only the Royal Griffin Knight Regiment of the Holy Roman Empire could have such a powerful regiment. They were also very famous in the continent. With them around, those masters would never be able to escape. The mercenaries couldn't help but think, could it be that the Barren Kingdom is at war with the Holy Roman Empire? Ron's heart skipped a beat. He would be an idiot if he didn't know what was going on when he saw the familiar attire. These people were definitely coming for him. His heart sank to the bottom of the valley. The enemy was an entire regiment, and there were countless griffin in the sky. It would be harder to break out of this encirclement. Ron was so nervous that his palms were sweating. He held the azure undead bone staff in his hand. This calmed him down a little. Grandpa Homelin, what do we do now? Homelin's face was unprecedentedly serious. I'm afraid the situation is not good. The main character is here. At this time, another group of Holy Crusade rushed in. These Holy Crusade automatically split into two lines after entering the mercenary station's tavern. The swords in their hands were raised to their chests. This action symbolized bravery and loyalty. Outside the door, a figure suddenly appeared. He was wearing a white half-body armor, revealing his strong muscles. He was wearing a red cloak, which was fluttering in the strong airflow. His expression was cold, full of the unswerving determination of a soldier. As soon as this person walked into the tavern's lobby, a powerful aura was released. Everyone took a step back in unison. These mercenaries, who were usually unruly, had a look of horror in their eyes. Facing this man in front of them, they suddenly lost the courage to resist. Cold sweat dripped down their foreheads, and the hands holding their swords began to tremble. Chapter 75. Wharton strode in and stood still. His eyes were like lightning as he looked around the tavern. There was no lack of master-level and master-level powerhouses in the mercenary station. Everyone lowered their heads in guilt, not daring to look him in the eye. The strong pressure made it hard for Ron to breathe. He wiped the cold sweat off his forehead and asked in horror, "Grandpa, what kind of strength does this guy have? Why does it seem like everyone is afraid of him?" Homelin's face was tense as he spat out a few words. "A powerhouse from the sacred domain." What? A powerhouse from the sacred domain? Ron was shocked when he heard this. This is serious. I didn't expect the Holy See to send a powerhouse from the sacred domain to hunt me down. Ron clenched his fists, his body trembling violently. His eyes were fixed on the red-robed man. Facing the increasing pressure, his beating heart suddenly sank to the bottom. Wharton waved his hand gently, and a man with chestnut-colored hair stepped forward with a smile on his face. He said in a clear voice, "Everyone in the mercenary tavern, I am Diallo, the deputy commander of the Holy See's Crusaders. And this is Wharton, the Lord of the Holy See's Hall of Piety. Now, please don't act rashly. The Holy See is only here to look for a person. We have no ill intentions towards you. Please cooperate with us obediently. Otherwise, the swords in the hands of our soldiers won't have eyes." These words seemed to be advice, but it was actually a threat. Under the powerful pressure of a powerhouse from the sacred domain, no one dared to move. However, a huge question arose in the hearts of these mercenaries. Looking for someone? Who? Who is worthy of a powerhouse from the sacred domain personally coming? Moreover, He had the powerful Holy Crusade and the Royal Griffin Knight Regiment with him. These mercenaries were very curious about the identity of this person. At this time, a fat meatball slowly came out from behind the counter. He looked a little nervous. He came in front of Wharton and said calmly, "Sir Wharton, I am the owner of this mercenary station and the mercenary tavern. I'm not looking for you. Get out of my way." Without waiting for Diallo to speak, Wharton bluntly said with a hint of displeasure on his face, "Yes, sir." The fat boss was frightened by Wharton and broke out in a cold sweat. He had naturally heard of the 9 giants of the Holy See, and none of them were people he could afford to offend. The fat boss took out a handkerchief to wipe his sweat and said, "Sir Wharton, our mercenary station belongs to the Mercenary Union. I'm afraid it's not very appropriate for you to lead your troops to surround a mercenary station." Wharton cast a dark glance at the fat boss and grinned. His smile carried a deep, murderous intent, and the boss was so frightened that he almost knelt down. "Everyone, don't worry. We're mainly here to look for a heretic. We won't cause trouble for the mercenary station. However, if you're harboring a heretic, then we won't be polite. If you know what's good for you, you'd better obediently hand him over." The fat boss said with a bitter face, "Sir, what are you talking about? Many mercenaries pass by our mercenary station every day to eat, stay, hand over missions, and so on. Where does the word harboring come from?" Wharton nodded sympathetically and smiled. "I understand your difficulties, but we have people who saw the heretic walk in with their own eyes. How about this? I'll search around here. What do you think?" This. The fat boss clenched his teeth. For the Mercenary Union, this request was simply too much. It was no different from a slap in the face. Even many mercenaries showed indignant expressions. However, with a powerhouse from the sacred domain standing there, no one dared to ask for a rebuff. The fat boss's eyes flashed fiercely. "Sir, if you insist on searching, I'm afraid I won't be able to explain it to the president." He was at his wit's end, so he could only bring up the Mercenary Union's president. He was also a powerhouse from the sacred domain. Wharton smiled proudly. "As for your president, I will naturally give him an explanation. This has nothing to do with you. Get out of my way." Saying so, he waved his hand and said with a smile, "Search." Diallo received the order as if it was an imperial edict. If it was just him, Diallo wouldn't dare to give such an order. He said loudly, "Martial law. Lock down the mercenary station and search for the heretic Ron." Yes. The soldiers of the Holy Crusade responded and began to move. They used their swords to force the mercenaries who were eating to stand up and line up. They held the portraits in their hands and identified them one by one. This was a great insult to the mercenaries. Among them, there was no lack of master-level or even master-level powerhouses. However, in front of a powerhouse from the sacred domain, they didn't have the slightest courage to resist. The difference in strength was too great. The fat boss's face alternated between red and white. Mercenary stations were all over the continent. Countless mercenaries came here to complete missions, stay, eat, and spend money. What was it for? It was for safety. In the mercenary station, mercenaries were strictly prohibited from fighting. Even if they wanted to seek revenge, they had to go outside. Therefore, it wasn't uncommon to see a mercenary station being surrounded. However, most of the time, it was between mercenaries. It wasn't targeted at the mercenary station itself, nor was it targeted at the Mercenary Union. If the fat boss knew who they were looking for, he might have handed the person over for the sake of a powerhouse from the sacred domain. However, now that the other party wanted to surround the mercenary station and search, the nature of the situation changed. But the fat boss couldn't do anything about it. The mercenary station had its own guards, but in the eyes of the powerhouses from the Holy Crusade and the sacred domain, it was so laughable. No one dared to go against the Mercenary Union. It wasn't because the Mercenary Union was powerful, but because behind the Mercenary Union stood thousands of mercenaries. These mercenaries relied on the Mercenary Union to survive. If no one issued missions, what would these mercenaries eat? What would they wear? The Mercenary Union happened to provide such a platform. According to the past, if someone offended the Mercenary Union, The mercenary union only needed to issue an assassination mission with a high reward, and thousands of mercenaries would work for them to make that person disappear from the world. However, this time was different. The other party was one of the 9 powerhouses of the Holy See, a powerhouse from the sacred domain. Who would dare to accept such a mission? Even if someone did, the price was not something the mercenary union could afford. The fat boss' only choice was to remain silent. The Holy Crusade searched one by one, and even pulled out the mercenaries who were sleeping in the rooms. The funny thing was that a few of them were in the middle of doing it and were forced out by swords. Their naked buttocks were particularly eye-catching. Those mercenaries had indignant looks on their faces, but on the surface, they had to obediently cooperate. This was a wise choice. No one wanted to be the target of a powerhouse from the sacred domain. They were about to find Ron. His heart was in his throat. Grandpa Hamelin, what should we do now? He had been on the path of cultivation for some time, and naturally knew how powerful a powerhouse from the sacred domain was. It was a kind of power that left him in the dust. His heart was filled with despair. Why don't you enter my body and help me? Hamelin sighed. It's useless. That powerhouse from the sacred domain isn't very strong. If it were me in the past, dealing with such an enemy wouldn't be a problem at all. But now I'm just a soul. Hamelin smiled bitterly. I can enter your body, but your weak soul restricts the use of my power. If it were an ordinary opponent, it wouldn't be a problem, but the opponent is a powerhouse from the sacred domain. If I use my superpower, I'm afraid your soul won't be able to withstand it. They were all powerhouses from the sacred domain, but there was still a huge gap between the sacred domain and the sacred domain. As a beginner in the sacred domain, Wharton was of course no match for Hamelin. Hamelin's strength was already at the peak of the sacred domain, and he was half a step into the realm of the gods. But even with such strength, Hamelin was helpless. Ron's soul was too weak to withstand his enormous soul power. Ron's eyes were filled with unwillingness. He had escaped from the Holy Roman Empire with great difficulty, and even escaped to another country. But he never thought that he would still be captured by them. He bit his lip. Then there's no other way? Hamelin shook his head and sighed. I can't think of any other way. Even if you use soul ignition and go all out, you're still no match for him. The gap is too big, and there's no way to make up for it. Unless what? Ron seemed to have seen a glimmer of hope. Hamelin hesitated for a moment. Unless you use the death god's power from that day, then there's only a possibility of escaping. Death god's power? The hope that had just been ignited in Ron's heart quickly dimmed. Ever since he had broken through, he had unintentionally obtained a trace of death divine energy. He had tried everything he could think of, but he could not find even a trace of death divine energy from his soul ring. He had asked Merlin, but Merlin had no clue either. You, stand up. Just as Ron was letting his imagination run wild, a cold voice sounded. A Holy Crusade soldier had unknowingly walked up to him and ordered him to stand up for inspection. Ron's face turned pale, and his hands trembled uncontrollably. You, stand up. The Holy Crusade soldier saw Ron's face and felt that it was familiar. When he saw it clearly, he was shocked. It's you? Damn it, I'll go all out. Ron clenched his teeth. He had made up his mind in an instant. Since he was going to die, he wouldn't let those guys have an easy time. With a swish, a sharp bone spur suddenly appeared in his hand, and he stabbed it into the abdomen of the Holy Crusade soldier. Poochie! The sharp bone spur easily penetrated the guy's stomach. The Holy Crusade soldier's eyes showed a trace of astonishment. He didn't expect the other party to be so ruthless. The one in front of him was just a 15-year-old child. The commotion upstairs alarmed everyone. The mercenaries looked over with astonishment. This guy had guts to make a move in front of a powerhouse from the sacred domain. Ron's appearance also attracted the attention of the Holy See soldiers. The soldiers' eyes were first filled with astonishment, then ecstasy. Ron had already thrown caution to the wind. He expressionlessly pushed the corpse of the Holy Crusade soldier down. The corpse fell to the first floor and hit the table with a loud bang. Blood splattered all over the floor, and everyone on the first floor was shocked. Chapter 76. Ron's eyes were filled with a deep hatred. Seeing Wharton's gaze, he didn't shrink back and looked at him. It's him. It can't be. It's actually him. That idiot who tipped 20 gold coins in one go. A 10-year-old child actually alarmed a powerhouse from the sacred domain of the Holy See? That's impossible, right? The mercenaries' eyes were filled with a trace of surprise when they saw Ron step forward. They would never have thought that a 10-year-old who still looked like a child would be personally captured by a powerhouse from the sacred domain. Looking at him, it seemed like there was some deep hatred between them. "I've finally found you, Ron." Wharton's lips curled into a slight smile. "I thought you would hide like a coward for the rest of your life." Ron took a deep breath and looked Wharton up and down. He said in a low voice, "What exactly do you want?" Wharton smiled. "It's very simple. Lay down your weapons and surrender. Come back with us and accept the judgment of the court." "Accept the judgment of the court?" "Ha!" Ron was so angry that he laughed. He stopped laughing and gritted his teeth. "Why? What makes you think you can judge a person's life and death?" "Yes, I practice necromancy, but what makes you think that people who practice necromancy are heretics?" At this moment, the mercenaries suddenly realized that the Holy See was here to hunt down heretics. No wonder they had mobilized so many people. However, it seemed like they were making a mountain out of a molehill to make such a big fuss over a necromancer. Some of the mercenaries looked at Ron with sympathy in their eyes. They thought to themselves, this guy could have learned anything, but he just had to learn necromancy, the most disliked of all. Not only did he offend the Holy See, he's also useless. What a fool. Wharton's face darkened. He was about to teach Ron a lesson. He never liked to talk nonsense with his enemies. Just as he was about to make a move, someone suddenly jumped out from the side. "How dare you?" Diallo's tone was high. "You damned heretic. What right do you have to speak to Lord Wharton in such a tone?" He then turned around and bowed to Wharton. "Lord Wharton, please allow me to teach this arrogant fellow a lesson." Wharton thought for a moment, smiled faintly, and nodded gently. "Go. If you can't handle it, don't come back to see me." Diallo was overjoyed. Wharton, non-committal, went to a nearby table and leisurely sat down to read a pornographic novel. "And this mercenary station will be your burial ground." Ron didn't think much of it, but Hamelin, who was in the soul ring, was about to explode in anger. Humble? Dirty? Despicable? When the Scourge Church ran amok in Amros, who knows where the Holy See was? This guy actually dares to spout nonsense in front of me? Hamelin was so angry that his beard blew and his eyes widened. He hated it when others looked down on the great necromancy magic. Boom! At this moment, a strong fiery light erupted from Diallo's body. The flames burned fiercely, making him look like a man on fire. Two large wings made of flames slowly spread out behind him, gently flapping. Wings of flame. This guy is a master-level powerhouse? The surrounding mercenaries' eyes flashed with shock. The Holy See's strength was indeed unfathomable. Even a random person from their ranks was a master-level powerhouse. Diallo, a mid-level great swordsman, cultivated fiery Do Chi. His attacks carried blazing heat. Even in the Holy See, where experts were as common as the clouds, there were few who could match him. Diallo seemed to be deliberately showing off. He spread his two wings of flame to the maximum. Looking at Ron's slightly pale face, he was very pleased with himself. Oomph, he's just a master-level powerhouse. I'll take him down in 3 minutes. Hamelin snorted in dissatisfaction. Ron, your body is too weak. I can't beat that Holy Domain powerhouse, but taking care of that guy is as easy as playing. Step aside and let me do it. I'll teach him a lesson this time. I'll let him know the power of necromancy magic. Hamelin said angrily. Without waiting for Ron to respond, Wharton frowned. Stop fooling around. Take care of him and go back early. Yes, sir. Diallo's heart trembled. He knew that he had gone too far and angered Sir Wharton. He raised his head and looked at Ron. With a smile, his whole body rose into the air. Rise into the air? He can fly. Ron was a little panicked. It's nothing. All master-level powerhouses can fly. Hamelin said in a deep voice. He's about to attack. Die. Diallo's eyes shone brightly. His body turned into a ray of light and pounced towards Ron. The opponent's sword carried a powerful flame power. Ron felt his body burning, as if he was about to be burned. The powerful force made him feel suffocated. Ron knew that the situation was bad. He chanted an incantation and desperately raised his bone shield, intending to block Diallo's powerful attack. It was too late to say it, but at that moment, a force suddenly arrived first, blocking in front of Ron. Boom! Diallo couldn't stop in time. He slashed out with his sword and clashed with the force, creating a huge explosion. A massive wave of energy flowed out, causing Diallo to feel incredibly shocked. This power was far greater than he had expected, and as soon as he came into contact with it, he was forced back. What? Diallo's eyes widened in disbelief. At that moment, he clearly saw that the powerful force was released by a small thing. That small thing was a chicken bone that had been gnawed by someone. He had actually forced a master-level expert to retreat with just a chicken bone. Diallo's flame-fighting aura was shaken to the point of scattering. Thump, thump, thump. He took a few steps back. He raised his head, and a trace of blood seeped out of the corner of his mouth. A look of horror flashed in Diallo's eyes. The strength of a necromancer was actually so powerful. At that moment, Wharton behind him stood up with a swish. A solemn expression hung on his face, and his eyes flashed. I wonder which sacred domain powerhouse has graced us with his presence. Please come out for a moment. Sacred domain powerhouse. Ron was stunned. Apart from Wharton, who was a sacred domain powerhouse, there were no other sacred domain powerhouses here. Homelin smiled and said slowly, "It's that old drunkard." He made a move. "It's him?" Ron's eyes fell on the old drunkard who had just taken 20 gold coins to buy wine. He rubbed his eyes, and a look of disbelief appeared on his face. "He's a sacred domain powerhouse? He doesn't look like one no matter how I look at him." In Ron's mind, sacred domain powerhouses should be like Wharton, valiant, domineering, and looking down on everyone in the world. However, the old drunkard in front of him, who was dressed like a beggar, didn't look very powerful at all. Homelin's mouth twitched, and a smile appeared on his face. The words sacred domain powerhouse aren't written on his face. The guy has the ability to conceal his aura. If he hadn't made a move, even I might not have been able to tell. Homelin continued, "I just don't know what his purpose is. If he can help you, you can avoid this crisis." Ron was stunned. "Are you saying that the old drunkard is stronger than Wharton of the Holy See?" Homelin didn't answer directly. "You'll find out soon enough." The entire mercenary station was quiet. Under Wharton's murderous gaze, all the mercenaries' hearts were thumping nonstop. They didn't even dare to breathe loudly, for fear of angering a sacred domain powerhouse. However, when they heard that there was another sacred domain powerhouse here, they were even more shocked. 2 sacred domain powerhouses. There were many practitioners in the Noah continent, but the number of people who became sacred domain powerhouses could be counted on one's fingers. Ordinary practitioners might not even see one in their entire life, but in the small Barberline kingdom, in a remote mercenary station, 2 of them suddenly appeared. Diallo was a little unconvinced at first, but when Wharton shouted the words sacred domain powerhouse, he immediately lost his will to fight. He wouldn't dare to fight a sacred domain powerhouse, even if he had 100 guts. He knew that if Wharton wanted to, that chicken bone would be enough to take his life. The only reason he was still alive was because Wharton showed mercy. Diallo quickly retreated to the side. In such a situation, if he said another word, he would be courting death. Diallo was very smart, and he wouldn't be so stupid. Wharton's gaze slowly swept across the mercenaries. At this moment, his gaze paused for a moment, and his body suddenly tensed up. A murderous aura was suddenly released. "It's you?" Wharton's eyes narrowed as he asked in a deep voice. The drunkard stood up and patted the dust off his body. He said to Wharton, "You still recognize me. It's not fun at all." The drunkard suddenly stood up, and his eyes shone. He straightened his body, and a domineering aura was born. He didn't look drunk at all. Although the drunkard was wearing tattered clothes, it couldn't hide the aura of a powerhouse. His hands hung naturally by his side, and there was a faint smile on his face. Wharton's clumsy and threatening aura didn't affect him at all. The mercenary station was so quiet that you could hear a pin drop. All the mercenaries were stunned. This old man who had been begging for wine every day for months was actually a sacred domain powerhouse. If they hadn't seen it with their own eyes, they wouldn't have believed it. Some of the people who refused to pay felt nervous. Wharton's eyes were like sharp swords as he stared at the drunkard. He gritted his teeth and asked word by word, "Who are you?" "Who am I?" The drunkard chuckled. "I've been living in seclusion for a long time. I only came out recently to walk around. I'm afraid not many people remember who I am. Even I almost forgot my own name." Chapter 77. However, Diallo turned pale with fright and cried out involuntarily, "Corbett? Blue Sword St. Corbett? Didn't you go missing? What are you doing here?" Corbett glanced at him and said coldly, "I went missing for a while, but I'm not dead." He smiled. "Perhaps many people have forgotten about me, but I didn't expect you to remember. However, you should also remember my other identity. I'm the guardian of the kingdom of Babel." It's him. Wharton also remembered. The guardian of the kingdom of Babel, Corbett, was the guardian of the kingdom of Babel. He didn't have a place to stay, and even though he was the guardian of the kingdom of Babel, he didn't accept any offerings from the kingdom of Babel. Instead, he lived a free life. In the past 10 years, there were rumors that he had gone missing. Who would have thought that he would appear in this remote mercenary station? The Blue Sword Saint was a sacred domain expert who cultivated water-type impetus to the peak. He had a unique understanding of water-type impetus. This understanding didn't refer to his impetus, but rather his swordsmanship. His unpredictable swordsmanship combined with his powerful water-type impetus made him one of the top experts in the sacred domain. Many people respected him when they heard the name Blue Sword Saint Corbett. The Blue Sword Saint represented his impetus, but his swordsmanship was his swordsmanship. Only his swordsmanship was worthy of being called a sword saint. Corbett smiled. "I've heard of Sir Wharton before. He's one of the 9 sacred domain experts of the Holy See, and he's the Lord of the Hall of Piety. However, he's a little more hard-headed." He was referring to Wharton's actions of leading his troops into the kingdom of Babel and ignoring their sovereignty. If the kingdom of Babel didn't have a guardian, no one would have dared to say a word. However, the kingdom of Babel had a guardian. Wharton naturally couldn't continue to cause trouble. Otherwise, he would have to be prepared for an all-out conflict. Even guardians wanted to save face. Wharton squinted his eyes and laughed dryly. "The Holy See was catching a heretic, and we accidentally ran into the territory of the kingdom of Babylon. Ha! This is all a misunderstanding." Corbett nodded in agreement. "That's a misunderstanding. I like the way you put it. Well then, Mr. Wharton, take your people and leave the kingdom of Babylon now." Sure. Wharton did not want to have a full-scale conflict with the other party. He nodded and pointed at Ron. "I'll take this heretic away and leave." Ron's heart sank. These people still didn't intend to let him go. He clenched the bone staff in his hand and decided in his heart that as long as the other party made a move, he would fight to the death. Even if he was killed in one move, he would not sit still and wait for death. Corbett glanced at Ron and smiled. "Mr. Wharton, I'm afraid I can't do that. You should know that this young man is in the kingdom of Babel. He's also a guest of the kingdom of Babel. If I let you take him away in our territory, what would others think of me? What would people think of the kingdom of Babel?" Everyone was shocked. They did not expect that Corbett, who was also in the sacred domain, would be so stubborn. He actually went against the Holy See in order to protect a worthless necromancer. Babel was only a small kingdom, while the Holy Roman Empire was a huge empire. Furthermore, the Holy See alone had 9 sacred domain powerhouses, while the kingdom of Babel only had 1. Was Corbett's brain kicked by a donkey? Wharton's face darkened. He smiled coldly and said, "Mr. Corbett, I have to remind you that he is a heretic. He has practiced evil necromancy magic and must be judged by the Holy See. Corbett shook his head and refused to back down. I'm sorry, Mr. Wharton. In the kingdom of Babel, there is no such thing as a heretic. As long as he obeys the laws of the kingdom of Babel, he is our guest. Wharton's eyes turned sharp. So, Mr. Corbett is prepared to go against the Holy See to the end? Is it worth it for a heretic? Corbett sneered back. If that's the case, Mr. Wharton, you brought your army into the kingdom of Babel. Are you prepared to go against me to the end? Wharton did not answer. Instead, he used his actions to show his determination. He stretched out his hand, and a beam of light shot out from his hand. Ron took a closer look and saw that it was a sword, a two-handed dark gold longsword. A faint light flowed on the sword, not overflowing at all, giving people a feeling of restraint. It looked extremely ordinary, but Ron knew that this sword was definitely a priceless item. Ron was shocked. This is a dark gold weapon? It looks very ordinary. The brilliance is restrained, mysterious, and low-key. This is a dark gold weapon. Hamelin said with a smile. This is going to be interesting. I wonder what kind of weapon that old drunkard will bring out. Looking at the dark gold high-grade sword, a strange look flashed across Corbett's eyes. He said slowly, "This is a good sword, but it depends on the heart of the sword user. Is there a sword in the sword?" As he spoke, he waved his hand, and a burst of energy was silently released. The rusty sword lying in the corner suddenly moved and appeared in his hand. Wharton's eyes froze. The sword in Corbett's hand was an ordinary one. It was not enchanted, and its quality was not even high. It was just a low-grade weapon. "You're going to fight me with this sword?" Wharton said coldly. Corbett waved the rusty sword in his hand a few times and replied casually, "It's enough." Wharton's body moved. At this moment, a powerful pressure was released in an instant. The surrounding space seemed to have been sealed. A scorching aura spread out in all directions. Everything in the surroundings felt as though they were being roasted in a furnace. What a powerful force! Ron felt that his body could not move. Only now did he realize the terror of a sacred domain expert. "Grandpa Hamelin, what is this?" "Domain," Hamelin said in a deep voice. "This is the fire elemental domain, raging inferno. This Wharton's strength is not simple. He can actually use the power of a domain." Domain. Ron was surprised. This was the first time he had heard the term domain. "Grandpa Hamelin, what is a domain?" A domain is the pinnacle of the fire elemental law. When one's comprehension of the fire elemental law reaches the peak, a domain will appear. "Ron, do you remember what I said about the power of the elements?" Ron nodded, indicating that he remembered. Hamelin continued, "The power of the elements fills the space around us. They are everywhere. A domain is a powerful force that controls all the fire elements in the space through the comprehension of the fire elemental law. When this force is strong enough, it will form a domain. So that's how it is." Ron nodded. At this time, he suddenly asked, "Grandpa Hamelin, if I cultivate to the level of a sacred domain expert, will I also have a domain?" "Yes." "What is the name of that domain?" "Undead Calamity." Ron and Hamelin only spoke for a moment. The powerful fire elemental domain's heat wave was oppressive. The surrounding mercenaries were afraid that they would be affected and retreated. However, they were still unable to resist the power of the fire elemental law. They bitterly endured the devastation of the fire elemental law. "A domain is indeed powerful," Corbett praised. Mist appeared on his body. That was the power of the water elemental law. Surrounded by the raging flames, Corbett was completely unharmed. Wharton forced Corbett and said in a deep voice, "Sir Corbett, if it is not necessary, I do not want to fight with you. I will say it again. For a heretic, is it worth it?" Corbett coldly smiled. "Let's fight. Since it has already come to this, what else can we say?" Wharton's eyes shone brightly. "Since you want to die, I will fulfill your wish." A figure flew into the sky. Wharton raised a long sword in his hand. A large amount of fire elemental law was drawn into the air and quickly gathered on the greatsword in Wharton's hands. Raging flames, city-breaking slash. the longsword hummed softly. A large amount of fire elemental law was poured into the sword, causing it to emit a special brilliance. The brilliance circulated, and Wharton's body was like a god descending to the mortal world. A powerful aura enveloped the surroundings. Boom! The mercenary station finally could not hold on any longer. Like a balloon that was constantly expanding, it suddenly exploded. The debris scattered in all directions, and the houses collapsed one after another. Quick! The house is going to collapse. Run! The mercenaries were not fools. Seeing the situation, if they did not escape, they would really lose their lives. The fire elemental law in the domain suddenly disappeared. All the fire elemental law was concentrated on the dark gold high-grade greatsword in Wharton's hands. Fortunately, it was such a high-grade equipment that could withstand such a powerful force. If it was an ordinary weapon, it would have already melted into slag. Die! Wharton's eyes flashed with a trace of sharpness. He raised the sword high and slashed out. Raging Flame's city-breaking slash was the ultimate version of the fire elemental law fighting technique, Raging Flame's city-breaking slash. It was filled with the elemental power of the fire domain. With a destructive aura, it violently blasted towards Corbett. Facing the blazing flames rushing towards him, Corbett was unmoved. On the contrary, a look of appreciation flashed in his eyes. What a fierce fighting technique! The Holy Sea, an ordinary powerhouse of the sacred domain, has such strength. It can be seen that the strength of the Holy Sea is indeed unfathomable. However, this kind of move is useless against me. Corbett smiled slightly. The rusty long sword in his hand slowly lifted up. Like flowing water, it drew a beautiful arc in the air. The gentleness of water and the violence of water were vividly displayed in this instant. Corbett did not have any aura around him. He seemed to be extremely casual, and the mottled weapon in his hand swung out a perfect sword strike. Skyflower water curtain. At this moment, the place where the two weapons clashed emitted a strong light. This light was so bright that it was difficult to open one's eyes. Silence. A deathly silence. There was no expected explosion, and there was no power spreading in all directions. The confrontation between the two had ended silently. Wharton's eyes were wide open. Even in death, he would not have thought that there would be such a strange ending. His Raging Flames city-breaking slash was absorbed the moment he clashed with his opponent. Not even a trace of it was left. Wharton looked at Corbett in disbelief. He only felt that his opponent was like a vast ocean, boundless and unfathomable. I lost. Chapter 78. The mercenary station had long been destroyed beyond recognition. All the mercenaries looked at each other in dismay. They didn't expect a battle between two powerful beings from the sacred domain to end in such a way. Oh my God, I actually saw a battle between powerful beings from the sacred domain. One of the mercenaries exclaimed excitedly. Search for the latest updates. Yeah, that's amazing. When will I have such strength? Another mercenary said. That drunkard is amazing. Ron was also shocked by Corbett's strength. That was such a perfect sword strike. He didn't know how many times it took to perfect it. It looked like an ordinary sword strike, as if it didn't contain any power, but it was this sword strike that turned Wharton's powerful flame attack into nothingness. Although Wharton wasn't injured, he knew that he had been defeated. He had really been defeated. He had already used all of his strength, but his opponent had still been able to neutralize his technique without paying any price. Wharton knew that his opponent's strength was a level higher than his. Wharton's face was tense. Your Excellency Corbett, although I lost, that heretic is extremely important to the Holy See. I hope that Your Excellency can give me some face and let me take him away. For this, we are willing to pay a considerable price. He bowed as he spoke. Wharton already knew that force wouldn't work, so he could only use soft tactics. In this world, everything had its value. As long as the price was enough, there was nothing that couldn't be bought. The Holy See had money. In fact, it wasn't just money. The Holy See could get anything they wanted. Wharton believed that as long as he agreed, the Holy See could offer him a price that would move his heart. Corbett smiled faintly. "I'm sorry, but I refuse." Wharton's face turned red and white when he heard this. He coldly said, "Your Excellency Corbett, I have to remind you that going against the Holy See will not end well. You're on your own. Let's go." Wharton was straightforward. He knew that with Corbett around, there was no way he could take Ron away. Although he had brought an entire army with him, numbers were meaningless in front of the mighty ones from the sacred domain. In this world, strength was the most important thing. Although Wharton was also a fire sword saint from the sacred domain, he was still a little inexperienced in front of Corbett, who had been famous for many years. The Holy Crusade quickly retreated, and the more than 10,000 people on the periphery left in the blink of an eye. The Griffin Legion in the sky also quickly retreated, leaving no trace behind. Phew, he has finally left. The mercenaries only felt their hearts relax, as if a huge rock had been lifted off their shoulders. The invisible pressure that had been surrounding them suddenly disappeared without a trace. These people secretly rejoiced. If two mighty ones from the sacred domain were to fight to the death here, they would inevitably be affected. Corbett also breathed a sigh of relief. As the victor in the conflict with Wharton, he also didn't feel good. The Holy See was too strong. This was just an ordinary sacred domain fighter, and yet he was already so strong. However, the Holy See's strength was obviously more than that. Strictly speaking, the Holy See's Holy Crusade had entered the territory of another country without warning. Strictly speaking, it could be classified as an act of aggression. Putting aside Corbett's identity as the guardian of the Kingdom of Babaran, just the fact that Babaran was his hometown meant that Corbett would not sit idly by. Corbett was still a little worried about going against the Holy See. He wasn't worried about himself, but about the people of his hometown. If the Holy Roman Empire was determined to take revenge, the Kingdom of Babaran would definitely not be able to resist. The only possibility was to ask for help from the Roman Empire. Forget it. Since it has already happened, there's no point in thinking about it anymore. Corbett shook his head. At this time, he looked up and happened to see Ron. At this time, Ron was standing in the ruins, looking at him. Corbett smiled. "Little brother, come here for a moment." Ron was stunned. "You called me?" The eyes of the surrounding mercenaries were filled with envy and jealousy. It seemed that this ordinary-looking young man was valued by Corbett, a powerhouse from the sacred domain. The words of a powerhouse from the sacred domain still carried a lot of weight in the entire continent. "Don't worry, he means you no harm." Hamelin spoke while Ron was hesitating. He had seen countless people, and he could tell what kind of person Ron was at a glance. Only then did Ron feel relieved and walked over. Corbett looked at Ron from head to toe. At this time, he had returned to his original appearance of an old urchin. He smiled and said, "Thank you for the wine." That red rose wine was really good. This time, it was Ron's turn to feel embarrassed. Corbett had defeated a powerhouse from the sacred domain. It could be said that he had indirectly saved his life. A few glasses of red rose wine could not be compared to that, even though the wine was very expensive. "Grandpa, I should be the one thanking you. If you hadn't defeated them, I would have definitely been captured and killed by them." "It's fine. I don't like the look of these bastards either," Corbett said with a smile. "By the way, why did they want to kill you?" Corbett asked after thinking for a while. Ron sighed. "I'm a necromancer, and I'm also a heretic in their eyes, so..." "Necromancer?" Corbett widened his eyes in surprise and shook his head. "Impossible, impossible." Seeing Ron's puzzled expression, Corbett explained, "Necromancers are indeed a heretic in the eyes of the Holy See." "That's right, but the problem is the Holy See can't possibly cross the border to hunt you down and even mobilize powerhouses from the sacred domain. If that's the case, there are many necromancers in the Roland Empire, but I haven't seen the Holy See dispatch powerhouses from the sacred domain to hunt you down." Ron pursed his lips and fell silent. Corbett smiled. "Why? Is there something that's hard to say?" If that's the case, I won't ask. Ron felt that this old man was very amiable and had no ill intentions towards him. Moreover, he had just saved his life. So he said, "They said that I'm an ancient necromancer." An ancient necromancer? Corbett's eyes widened, and his face revealed an expression of disbelief. He looked Ron up and down and nodded. "Is this true?" "Well, this explains why the Holy See dispatched powerhouses from the sacred domain, but—" Corbett thought for a while and asked hesitantly, "I've heard of the legends of the ancient necromancers, but I don't know if it's true." He looked at Ron with a burning gaze. "Ron, you come with me." Where are we going?" Ron asked in surprise. Corbett grabbed his hand. "To a place where there's no one. I want to see if the ancient necromancy is as powerful as the legends say." Corbett was a martial arts fanatic and had a strong interest in cultivation. He had seen necromancers in the Roland Empire and scoffed at the legends of the ancient necromancers. Now that he had the chance to see a real necromancer, his heart was already itching. He had no ill intentions towards Ron. He was just curious. Go. Let him read the necromancy novels. The magic is powerful. Hamelin encouraged in his mind. Holding Ron's hand, Corbett moved and flew into the air with a swoosh. The remaining mercenaries on the ground looked at each other. Because they were far away, they couldn't hear what the two were talking about. But when they saw that Ron was chosen by the legendary aqua blue sword Saint Corbett, their eyes were still filled with envy. The fat shop owner wanted to cry, but had no tears. The mercenary station he ran was destroyed by a powerhouse from the sacred domain. Losing money was one thing, but the most difficult thing was that he didn't know how to explain it to the mercenary union. Mercenary stations were a form of cooperation between merchants and the mercenary union. The mercenary union had a huge influence as a backing. Mercenary stations were fully opened in various places to provide services to mercenaries, and a portion of the profits will be turned over every year. With countless mercenary stations across the continent, the mercenary union made a lot of money from this. Now, use your most powerful attack to attack me, Corbett said with a smile. Don't worry, Ron. I won't hurt you. Ron nodded. He took out his bone staff and softly chanted an incantation. Not long after, a dozen skeleton warriors crawled out from the ground. Corbett frowned. That's it. Summoning a bunch of useless skeletons? They don't seem to be that powerful. They're no different from those ordinary necromancers. Ron slowly raised his head, and a light flashed in his eyes. He softly said, Go. The skeleton hero waved the bone axe in his hand and charged at Corbett without fear of death. Insignificant tricks. Corbett lightly waved his hand. He didn't seem to use any strength, but a formless energy was released from his hand and pushed towards the skeleton warriors. He only used half of his strength. Corbett's eyes finally revealed a look of surprise. He saw that the skeletons were as if nothing had happened. They easily defeated the energy and madly charged at Corbett. Interesting. Corbett was excited as if he had discovered a new continent. He increased his strength to 10%, but the skeleton warriors still managed to resist. Not only that, the axes in the skeleton warriors' hands were extremely nimble. Corbett only used 10% of his strength to deal with them. At this moment, he glanced at the other side and saw that Ron had already summoned the second wave of skeleton warriors. They were ready to attack. The ancient necromancers really live up to their reputation. Corbett chuckled and gave a thumbs up. With these skeletons, at the very least, advanced warriors won't be a match for you. Corbett exposed Ron's strength with a single sentence. Grandpa, my cultivation isn't up to par yet, Ron said embarrassedly. He tactfully stopped, and the skeleton warriors disappeared in a puff of smoke. It's already very good for you to have such strength at your age. In time, your strength will definitely improve further. I can understand why the Holy See is so nervous, Corbett said with a smile, not hiding his admiration for Ron in the slightest. But I'm curious. Ancient necromancy has disappeared for more than 100,000 years. Why would it appear in your body? This I can't tell you. Ron thought that he shouldn't tell him about Hamelin's grandfather. Okay, I know you're in a difficult position. I won't ask anymore. Corbett also knew that he had asked the wrong question. It was the first time they had met, so there was no need to spill all the secrets. He said with a smile, I'm looking forward to your strength. I look forward to the day you become a powerful being in the sacred domain. I have a feeling that you'll definitely be able to reach that level. Ron's face also showed a determined look. Yes, Grandpa, I'll work hard. Corbett smiled. If I'm not wrong, you're going to the Roland Empire, right? Ron nodded and didn't deny it. The Roland Empire is very good. It's much better than the Holy Roman Empire. It's known as the country with the freedom of magic. You can practice anything there. Corbett said with a smile. If you have the chance, go to the Balarax Academy in the Roland Empire to visit my granddaughter. I haven't seen her for many years. I miss her. Tell her to visit this old man in the kingdom of Barbarin when she has time. Ron nodded. If I pass by the Balarax Academy, I'll pass on your words. Okay, Ron, I won't take up any more of your time. Let's part ways here. Corbett smiled, and his body slowly floated up. With a move of his body, he disappeared into the sky with a whoosh. By the way, what's your granddaughter's name? Ron asked. Only then did he remember that he hadn't asked Corbett's granddaughter's name. He didn't know how to pass on the message. After a while, Corbett's deep voice came faintly from the distance. She's called Sia. Yeah. Chapter 79. The Balarax Academy was located in the city of Balarax. It had a long history and occupied a large area. A long time ago, the entire city of Balarax was the Balarax Academy. The residents of the city lived around the Balarax Academy and provided all kinds of services to its students. However, the city of Balarax had expanded again and again. Furthermore, the Balarax Academy was no longer the only academy in the city, but also the location of the three great academies of the Roland Empire. Search for the latest updates here. Apart from the Balarax Academy, there were two other academies. They were the Soaring Dragon Academy was the academy that had been developing the fastest recently. It wasn't inferior to the Balarax Academy in any way. The academy's most distinctive feature was the Dragon Knights. No, to be precise, the Earth Dragon Knights. They rode Earth Dragons into battle. Dragon Knight was a glorious title. Most of the students in the Soaring Dragon Academy had this dream and worked hard to achieve it. The Hans Academy was established several hundred years ago by a sacred domain expert who was a combination of a thief and an assassin. His name was Hans. The Hans Academy had been developing for several hundred years and was once glorious. However, compared to the Balarax Academy and the Soaring Dragon Academy, the Hans Academy seemed to be in decline. However, the thieves and assassins trained by the Hans Academy were second to none in the entire continent. The three academies of the Luo-Lan Empire were all comprehensive institutions, not just established for a single major. For example, the Balarax Academy mainly focused on mages, but the knight, swordsman, and thief majors were also not inferior. Similarly, the Flying Dragon Academy and the Hans Academy were also the same. Every year, these academies would produce several outstanding talents. The Balarax Academy had the longest history. Its buildings were a bit old and had a heavy feeling of history. Today was the spring enrollment day of the three academies of the Roland Empire. The three academies would enroll once a year in the spring. They would all be held at the same time to compete for the best pornographic novels. It wasn't that big of a deal to recruit ordinary students, but the key was to recruit those specially recruited students, those outstanding geniuses. Recruiting one such person was more effective than recruiting 1,000 ordinary students, and the influence they could achieve was incomparable. The special admissions officers of the various academies were not to be trifled with. The extremely talented young students from all over the country had long been targeted. For this reason, the various academies had offered all kinds of conditions to attract these talented students to study. Waiving the tuition fee was only one of the lowest methods. How are the few specially recruited students that I've set my eyes on this year? Sigh. I hope they haven't been poached away by others. A wretched-looking old man, Vice Headmaster Dabbs, thought to himself as he walked. He held a thick stack of documents in his hands as he hurried to the special admissions office. The documents in his hands were all about the geniuses. If any of them escaped, it would be a great loss to the academy. Crash! Debussy was caught off guard and bumped into someone at the corner. The worst part was that the person had a cup of water in his hand and poured it all over him. Fuck! Who? Who doesn't look where they're going? Rubbing his face that was full of water droplets, Dabbus almost cursed out loud. Those important documents were all soaked. Hey, Minter Vivian, so it's you. When he saw the person in front of him clearly, he didn't curse out loud. Instead, he looked at her with a frown. The person who had come was Vivian, a Minter of the Necromancy Major in the Balarax Academy. She stood to the side uneasily and apologized. I'm sorry, Headmaster Dabbs, I didn't mean to. Vivian was about 23 or 24 years old. Her beautiful black hair was tied tightly behind her head, and she was wearing a black magic robe that hugged her lithe body tightly. Her fair, egg-like face and innocent expression were lethal to any man. Vivian was the youngest Minter in the Balarax Academy. This wasn't because she was knowledgeable or powerful, but because she was in a special department, necromancy. Vivian's father had retired due to health problems and inherited the position of Minter in the academy. Her father was also a necromancer. What was surprising was that he was rather old, already in his 60s. Because he married late, having Vivian when he was 40 years old, Vivian and her father looked like grandfather and granddaughter when they stood together. Many people wouldn't believe that he was her father. The necromancy major was a well-known loser in the academy. In the 3 years since Vivian took over the necromancy major, she hadn't recruited a single student. Because of this, the higher-ups of the academy were dissatisfied. Vivian herself felt wronged. The academy's tuition was getting higher and higher, and the legends of the power of the necromancy major had already spread across the entire continent. Who would still want to learn necromancy magic that couldn't withstand a single blow? Even if they wanted to learn, the necromancers on the streets only charged 1 gold coin, and the necromancers would teach them. Anyone would know what to do. Dabu lightly coughed and said to Vivian, Vivian, your necromancy major hasn't recruited a single student in the past 3 years. In addition to your father's time, your necromancy major hasn't had a single student in 7 years. As the higher-ups of the academy, it's also very difficult for us. Dabu was using this as a pretext to make a fuss, but what he said was also true. I'm sorry, Dean Dabu, Vivian said in fear and trepidation. I will definitely work hard. Vivian was extremely nervous. Looking at the entire continent, there was no one who practiced necromancy magic. The Soaring Dragon Academy didn't have any. When the Hans Academy first opened, it was for a period of time, but it was later canceled. Today, only the Balarax Academy retained this ancient major. This wasn't something to boast about. The Balarax Academy was ridiculed by the other 2 great academies. The higher-ups of the academy had always been talking about canceling the necromancy major, and this year was the most intense. If the necromancy major was canceled, Vivian's income would also be gone. She could only rely on her father's retirement income to live. Vivian's salary wasn't high, but compared to other necromancers, it was still considerable. Dabu shook his head, tidied up his drenched clothes, and said, Vivian, this isn't your problem. There are necromancers everywhere outside. 1 gold coin is enough for you to learn. Adding on the strength of necromancers. You also know that the only path left for necromancy magic is research. Vivian, the higher-ups of the academy have already decided to cancel the necromancy major next year. You don't have to worry. The academy won't treat you unfairly. They will arrange a position for you to guard the library. After all, your father has been a teacher for the academy for several decades. We all know this. Dabu thought about it and decided to announce this decision here so that Vivian could be mentally prepared. Headmaster Dabu, you can't. Vivian became anxious when she heard this. She knew that the academy was serious. She hurriedly said, Headmaster Dabu, I will definitely recruit students this year. Please rest assured. Daba smiled. It doesn't matter if you recruit or not. The higher-ups of the academy have already decided. This cannot be changed. Unless the headmaster personally says it, I think it will be difficult to change anything. Looking at Vivian's expression, Darba sighed. Vivian, you're too weak. I'm not making things difficult for you. Think about it yourself. Is there really a need for the necromancer profession to be passed down? He shook his head and no longer cared about Vivian. He turned and left. Vivian stood rooted to the ground. Her heart was filled with disappointment. She couldn't help but ask herself, is there really a need for the necromancer profession to be passed down? There were many legends about necromancers. Those third-rate novels that sold for a silver coin by the roadside all described them as powerful, mysterious, and terrifying. However, necromancers in reality were useless. They were not powerful, mysterious, or terrifying. Those necromancers were at the bottom of society, and their status was similar to that of beggars. Even Vivian had to admit that the necromancers in those third-rate novels were written by necromancers who were at the bottom of society and had failed to achieve their goals. They wrote so that they could fill their stomachs with 3 meals a day. It was these third-rate novels that had tricked many people into embarking on the path of necromancers. However, it was too late for regrets after learning them. Today, there was no one who came to learn these so-called necromancers. Necromancers had completely torn off their hypocritical skin. Even Vivian herself didn't have much confidence. Just then, a few voices entered her ears. It turned out that a few students had passed by and were quietly discussing. Look, isn't that teacher Vivian? TSK, what kind of teacher is she? She's just a pitiful worm trying to make a living. She hasn't even taught a single student. So it's like that. I see that she's quite a nice person. Which department does she teach? The useless necromancy department. So it's like that. The few students whispered and tried to lower their voices. However, not a single word escaped from their mouths and entered Vivian's ears. The few students chatted and soon walked far away. When they passed by her, they revealed looks of disdain. Sigh. Looking at the backs of those students, Vivian let out a long sigh. 3 years, a whole 3 years. Vivian didn't know how many people rolled their eyes and talked about her like this. She was already used to it. Even her father was the same. Among the few students he taught, most of them dropped out after a few months. There was no other reason other than that they couldn't stand all kinds of strange looks. In this world where strength was respected, those without strength would naturally be looked down upon. Compared to the other teachers, Vivian's strength couldn't even compare to that of a normal student. If it wasn't for her identity as a teacher and being protected by the school's rules, no one would dare to do anything to her. However, mocking and ridiculing, scolding and cursing, and even humiliating her in public were not uncommon. It wasn't just the students, but the teachers as well. This made Vivian's position somewhat awkward. She was already numb to it. Chapter 80. I'm finally in the Roland Empire. I'm finally free. Ron suppressed the joy in his heart and almost couldn't help but shout out loud. He stood in front of the west gate of the Roland Empire's border city, greedily breathing in the free air. Ever since entering the Roland Empire, Ron felt unprecedentedly relaxed. Here, he could do whatever he wanted without anyone interfering. Even when he summoned the skeleton warriors, people only looked at him in surprise. No one came forward to criticize him, and there were no bounty posters posted on the streets. The atmosphere of freedom here made Ron's heart relax. Search for the latest update here. Congratulations, Ron. You've finally safely escaped from the Holy Sea's sphere of influence. You don't have to be afraid of being hunted down anymore. In the Roland Empire, you don't have to hide anymore. From now on, you can stand tall and walk the path of the strong step by step. Homelin said with a smile. I will. Ron's eyes flashed with confidence. I will work harder. After entering the Roland Empire, it was natural to enjoy the flavor and scenery of the Roland Empire. Wutan City was roughly equivalent to a medium-sized city in the Holy Roman Empire. Unlike the Holy Roman Empire, The atmosphere of commerce here was much stronger. Everyone's face was filled with happy smiles, and there was an endless stream of merchants and carriages coming and going. Unlike the Holy Roman Empire, there was no solemn holy cathedral here. Instead, there were mage towers that rose from the ground. Here, magicians that were rarely seen could be found everywhere. They wore the unique robes of the Roland Empire with the symbol of the Magic Union on them. They held magic staffs in their hands and talked about all kinds of magic. Ron looked left and right. It was an eye-opener for him. He saw two people standing on the street and loudly preaching magic concepts. Those who disagreed with them argued with them. The two sides argued on the street, causing many passers-by to stop and watch and listen patiently. Ron was also intoxicated. Hamelin said, "Ron, a lot of what they're talking about are elementary magic theories, and many of them are wrong. I think you'd better not listen to them." Ron reluctantly looked away and replied, "Nothing. I just feel that the atmosphere here is too good." Indeed, Hamelin also praised. Compared to the Holy Roman Empire, this place is much freer. As Hamelin spoke, he turned his head slightly. Suddenly, his expression froze. After a while, his body began to tremble. "Grandpa Hamelin, what's wrong with you?" Ron felt that something was wrong and hurriedly asked. Hamelin didn't say anything. His trembling finger pointed at a place not far away. His face was filled with anger and sorrow. "What? Why are you making such a fuss over nothing?" Ron turned his head casually. In an instant, his eyes widened. What did he see? He saw necromancers. That's right, necromancers. Before this, Ron had always heard people say where necromancers were the most abundant. The answer was undoubtedly the Roland Empire. Now, Ron and Hamelin finally saw the so-called necromancers with their own eyes. But the reality was something they couldn't accept. What kind of necromancers were those? Their clothes were tattered, and they were holding something that looked like a bone in their hands. Their expressions were wooden. If one didn't look carefully, one would believe that they were corpses. Those people were controlling many skeletons. Those skeletons were struggling to carry a big box. Their movements were extremely slow, and their two black eye sockets didn't emit a trace of soul power. These skeletons didn't even have weapons in their hands. They were lifeless like machines. The necromancers controlling them were obviously like coolies. They were exposed to the sun and rain in exchange for 3 meals. These necromancers were considered lucky. In a corner on the other side, a large group of necromancers were sitting or lying down, waiting for a suitable job. When they looked at the necromancers carrying the box, their eyes were filled with envy. At the same time, they anxiously looked around, hoping that a kind employer would take a fancy to them and hire them. At this time, on the other side of Ron, a necromancer sitting down attracted their attention. It was a very ordinary young man. He was sitting on the ground, holding all kinds of cards in his hands. In front of him, there was a lion-shaped skeleton. This lion had 2 bone wings on its back and a huge protrusion on its tail. If Hamelin wasn't wrong, that was the skeleton of a poison scorpion lion. On the back of the poison scorpion lion skeleton sat a little boy about 10 years old. The little boy innocently grabbed the 2 bone spurs on the back of the poison scorpion lion, his face full of smiles. Hamelin noticed that the so-called skeleton of the poison scorpion lion was just a skeleton. There wasn't a trace of soul power in that skeleton. It couldn't even compare to the skeleton warriors that Ron had summoned for the first time. The poison scorpion lion walked unhurriedly. Every step it took shook a few times, as if it would fall apart at any time. The little boy rode on the poison scorpion lion's back happily, playing a riding game. The young necromancer beside him was sweating profusely. It looked like he was using a lot of energy to support the poison scorpion lion's movements. Not far behind the poison scorpion lion, a young noble couple was pointing and talking about pornographic novels. They looked at the little boy with a loving expression. "My dear, look at how cool our son is riding on the poison scorpion lion. It looks like he has the potential to become a poison scorpion lion knight." The woman leaned her head lightly on the man's shoulder and said gently. The man laughed and said, "Of course, don't you know whose fine breed this is? The woman laughed and hit him. Dream on. Would you have been able to give birth to this child without me? The man was giggling foolishly. Time's up. The young man, controlling the poison scorpion lion, said in a hoarse voice. At this moment, the poison scorpion lion stopped and turned into a puff of smoke, disappearing on the spot. So fast. The man walked up to the necromancer and asked, 3 silver coins each time, 10 minutes each time. Time's up. The young necromancer wiped the sweat off his face and answered, Ma, I still want to play. I still want to play. At this moment, the little boy who had been playing happily grabbed the young woman's thigh and begged. The woman was helpless. She patted her son's head. All right, play. Let's continue playing. She then turned to her husband. My dear, look. The man nodded. Then let's play one more time. As he spoke, he looked at the necromancer on the ground and picked up a card. This one, Dragon Knight. Heh, how cool. The young necromancer nodded and chanted an incantation. Not long after, a black fog rose from the ground. Hamelin frowned. No, he chanted the incantation wrong. Also, he doesn't seem to have cultivated spiritual energy. Not long after, a flying dragon-like thing appeared in front of them. This flying dragon-like skeleton was about 2 meters long and half a meter tall. It looked just like a real flying dragon. It flapped its wings, swung its tail, and shook its head, causing the surrounding people to burst into laughter. Dragon Knight! Dragon Knight! The little boy quickly ran to the flying dragon-like skeleton and climbed up. At this moment, the flying dragon-like skeleton began to move. It continuously spread its wings and made a caw-caw sound as it flapped its wings. A few poor people's children stood around and looked at the little boy riding the flying dragon-like skeleton with envy in their eyes. Although they could only play for a while, 3 silver coins wasn't something anyone could afford. Heh, look, our son might even become a dragon knight. Look at how professional he is playing. He looks just like a real dragon knight when he rides it. The young noblewoman clapped her hands and said. The man also responded with a smile. That's good. When he grows up, I'll send him to the Soaring Dragon Academy. He'll ride a real dragon and become a real dragon knight. Aye. Ron sighed and shook his head. He knew that this kind of skeleton couldn't fight. He turned his head and saw that Hamelin's grandfather was already in tears. Ron was shocked. Grandpa Hamelin, what happened to you? Nothing. Hamelin suddenly realized that he had lost control of himself. He took a deep breath and wiped away the tears on his cheeks. It's just a feeling in my heart, thinking of the Scourge Church 100,000 years ago. Necromancers were so noble. But now they have fallen to this point. Hamelin smiled sadly. Before I saw it with my own eyes, I never thought that this pile of useless skeletons without any power, even inferior to an ordinary person, would be summoned by a necromancer. Haha, very good. This is a necromancer. Damn, it's really ironic. Hamelin took a deep breath. I remember now. When those people heard about necromancers, they looked at you with disdain. Because of this, they looked down on you many times. Seeing all of this, I think I've found the answer, he sighed again. I was mentally prepared for the decline of necromancy, but I didn't think that necromancy would decline to this point. Look at these skeletons. If the ancestors of the Scourge Church saw all of this, I'm afraid they'd be so angry that they'd come back to life. Ron was downcast. After a while, he said, Grandpa Hamelin, everything will get better. How about this? I'll teach them true necromancy magic. This way, necromancy magic will flourish, and our necromancers won't have to live so miserably. Hamelin thought for a while, but still shook his head. No, now's not the time to teach them necromancy magic. Ron asked in shock why. Hamelin replied, necromancy magic has declined to this point. If you teach them necromancy magic now, it's the same as starting a sect. Without great power, it's impossible. In addition, the rise of the Scourge Church and the strong return of necromancy magic will definitely stir some people's nerves. When the time comes, you'll face many difficulties and dangers. Only your own great power will be the guarantee for your rise. Without that, it's just empty talk. Ron understood and nodded. Grandpa Hamelin, what do you think I should do now? Hamelin muttered to himself for a while, then said, "On the road of cultivation, you don't need anyone to teach you anything. As long as I know it, I can teach you anything. And to become strong, you don't just need cultivation, you also need a lot of knowledge. You need to understand this world. You need to grasp magic, do-chi, and other related situations, strengths, weaknesses, and so on. Furthermore, the knowledge I have from 100,000 years ago can no longer keep up with this era. You may need to go to a specialized academy to systematically study." Ron nodded. "I understand." Hamelin sighed, then said solemnly, "Ron, I hope you can promise me one thing, at least when you have the ability." "Grandpa Hamelin, speak." Chapter 81. As soon as Ron stepped into Balarax, he was attracted by the atmosphere of the city. The spring enrollment was the highlight of the year, and it was currently in full swing. Balarax was filled with luxurious carriages. Countless nobles and commoners were sending their children to the 3 great academies of the Roland Empire. There was a long queue in front of each academy's entrance. Search for the latest updates. It's so lively. I've never seen such a scene before. Hamelin sighed. Were there no academies 100,000 years ago? How did those powerhouses covet them? Ron asked. Hamelin shook his head. At that time, the major powers selected geniuses from all over the country and trained them. It's different now. Along the way, Ron saw a dazzling lineup of advertisements for the 3 great academies. In order to compete for students, there was a fierce competition. The Balarax Academy has enjoyed 1,000 years of fame. It's your best choice. Do you want to become a dragon knight? Do you want to ride a dragon and soar into the sky? Then come to the Soaring Dragon Academy. This is the cradle of dragon knights. This is where your dreams begin. Sir, here you go. Just as Ron was feasting his eyes, a sweet-looking girl wearing a short skirt and long boots handed him a piece of paper. Ron took a look and saw that it was an advertisement for the Roland Empire's Hans Academy. It showed that the Hans Academy's tuition had been greatly reduced, and it only cost a few hundred gold coins a year. Hamelin took a look. That's too cheap. This is cheap. Ron shook his head. I don't have that much money. It's expensive. Hamelin exclaimed. In the past, learning necromancy magic would cost a few hundred gold coins. But now it's only a few hundred gold coins a year. It's a pity I don't have money. Ron could only look at the paper in his hand and shake his head. A few hundred gold coins was not expensive, but he had spent almost all of his money. Ron looked at it for a while and reluctantly threw the paper in his hand away. At this time, his attention was attracted by a commotion on the other side. Beginner Magic Apprentice, 8th stage. 15 years old, Intermediate Apprentice Swordsman, 5th Dan. 14 years old. Ron took a closer look. It turned out that there was a talent test for magic power and chi value. Generally speaking, the younger the age, the higher the strength, and the better the talent. Hello, would you like to take a magic test? A girl with the same long hair walked over with a smile. Please allow me to introduce myself. I work in the admissions office of the Soaring Dragon Academy. I'm in charge of receiving new students. If new students can pass the test and achieve good results, our Soaring Dragon Academy can waive your tuition fee. Tuition fee reduction? How much is the reduction? Ron's interest was piqued. 50% reduction for senior apprentices. Pornographic novels. 70% discount for magic apprentices. Normal price for magic apprentices. The girl replied with a smile. Of course, our Soaring Dragon Academy's discount is only for magicians. Other professions don't have this kind of discount. While speaking, she sized up Ron with a glance. Little brother, looking at your thin and weak appearance, you can't possibly be a warrior or knight, right? If you're a mage, you could give it a try. Only magicians have a discount. Ron's face turned bitter. Unfortunately, I'm not a magician. If you're not a magician, then you must be a thief or an archer. How about this? I'll go inside and talk to the instructor to see if there's a discount or something. The girl thought for a moment and replied, I'm also not a thief or an archer. Ron anxiously replied, Then what are you? The girl was surprised. You can't be a druid, right? That's a profession that only elves have. Could it be that you're an elf? I'm also not an elf. Ron said, I'm a necromancer. Do you have any necromancer profession here? Necromancer. The girl was startled. Her smile immediately disappeared, revealing a disgusted expression. Go, go, go. How can a necromancer be qualified to come to such a sacred and noble place like the Academy? If you want to learn necromancer, only the oldest Balarax Academy has it. How can our Soaring Dragon Academy have such a profession? After saying this, she ignored Ron and turned around to leave. Balarax Academy? Ron inwardly muttered. At this time, Hummelin spoke. Ron, then go to the Balarax Academy and take a look. Maybe you can find out some secrets about necromancer. The words Balarax Academy entered Ron's eyes. Like the other two academies, the Balarax Academy, as the oldest one, was also very popular. The registration area for the magician class was already filled with people. A long line extended to the street. Magician, knight, swordsman, thief. Ron looked around one by one, but unexpectedly didn't find the necromancer profession. Ron couldn't help but scratch his head. Didn't they say that the oldest Balarax Academy opened the necromancer profession? Why isn't there a registration area? Asked someone. Hommelin thought for a moment and said, Hello, may I ask where the necromancer profession's registration area is? Ron stopped a Balarax staff member and asked, Necromancer? The staff member was stunned. He looked up and down at Ron, a disgusted expression appearing in his eyes. I don't know. After saying this, he ignored Ron and turned around to leave. Ron didn't give up and followed up with a few more questions. They all had the same disdain and disgust on their faces. These people are really too much. They clearly know why they don't answer. Ron angrily sat on the side and sulked. On the contrary, Hommelin comforted him. It's okay, we'll ask again. Ever since Hommelin saw the current situation of necromancers, he had come to terms with it. Given the strength of necromancers, it was inevitable that they would be looked down upon. In this world where strength was respected, it wasn't strange at all. Hommelin looked up slightly. At this moment, something flashed past the corner of his eye. It was a flag with a black skull symbol. His heart skipped a beat. Ron, quickly go and ask if that's the necromancer profession. Ron looked up and smiled. It should be. I'll go and ask now. Vivian lay listlessly on the table, her long black hair hanging down and covering her beautiful face. Putting aside her strength, Vivian was also a beauty. However, because she was a necromancer, all the students and instructors kept a respectful distance from her. In their eyes, necromancers were like evil witches, a combination of inauspiciousness and filth. If she wasn't an instructor, someone would have already taught her a lesson. It had been 3 days, and no one had asked about the necromancy major. When she hung up the skull flag, no one was even interested in looking at it. AI. Registration ends tomorrow. It's the last year of the necromancy major. Don't even talk about registering. No one even asked. Vivian thought in distress. These days, she had thought of all sorts of ways to recruit students. She tried to take the initiative, but when the other party heard that it was the necromancy major, their heads shook like a rattle drum. No matter how hard she tried, she couldn't convince a single person. AI, forget it. The necromancy major is going to be abolished next year anyway. Why should I lead the students astray? Vivian thought self-deprecatingly. She slowly stood up and prepared to pack up and leave. Everywhere else was filled with students and staff, but in the necromancy major, Vivian was the only one busying herself. Excuse me. Just as Vivian was packing up, a crisp voice asked. Vivian looked up and sized up the person. The person was about 15 years old and had a pair of big, lively eyes. He had the most unlikable black hair in the continent of Noah that covered his forehead. His eyes were also black and were spinning around. Vivian quickly lowered her head and continued to pack up her things. She didn't even raise her head as she said, Are you registering for the magic major? Just walk straight and turn left. Vivian thought that Ron was asking for directions. After all, the Balarax Academy was very big. It was normal to get lost. The voice was obviously stunned. I'm not here to register for the mage major. Then you're in the swordsman major? Go straight and turn right. That's where the swordsman registration is. But seeing how skinny and weak you are, I'm afraid you won't pass the instructor." Vivian quickly packed up her things and looked up, revealing a smile to him. "Eh. I'm also not here to register for the swordsman major." Ron mustered up his courage and said, "I'm here to register for the necromancy major." "The necromancy major is in," Vivian said. Suddenly, her eyes widened. "What? You want to register for the necromancy major?" She turned her head, surprised and happy. Her body even trembled with excitement. After 3 years, the necromancy major finally had a student. To think that such a scene would occur in the last year. "Oh my God, are you playing with me? Wait, I have to confirm. That kid isn't playing with me, right?" Vivian thought to herself. She cleared her throat and asked, "Are you sure you want to register for the necromancy major?" Ron was also shocked by Vivian's big reaction. After a while, he stammered, Yes, I really want to learn necromancy magic. Looks like it's true." Vivian knew that this person wasn't playing with her. She secretly let out a sigh of relief. Looking at the last student of the necromancy major, her expression was a bit complicated. Ron felt strange and asked, "This big sister, is there a problem? How much does it cost to register?" "I don't care so much. Since he came to register, I'll accept him. At least I have a student." Vivian thought to herself. After 3 years, she finally had a taste of being an instructor. "My name is Vivian. You can just call me Instructor Vivian. As for the tuition, 20 gold coins." Vivian was afraid that Ron would run away. Originally, the registration fee was 60 gold coins, but seeing his tattered appearance, she gritted her teeth and reduced it to a third. She would pay the remaining 2/3 out of her own pocket. She even planned to pay all the money even if the other party didn't pay a single coin. Phew, that's good. It's only 20 gold coins. Any more, and I won't be able to afford it. Ron secretly let out a sigh of relief. He only had 30 or so gold coins on him. He took out 20 gold coins from the space bag and placed them on the table. "Here you go. Space bag, this guy is actually a nouveau riche." Seeing the space bag at Ron's waist, Vivian's heart skipped a beat. Having a space bag at least meant that his family background wasn't bad. But why would such a person come to learn necromancy magic? Could he be another victim of a third-rate novel? Vivian calmly put away the money and put on an act. The tuition fee is enough. Come and fill in the form." Right, what's your name? You're tuning in to the Warrior Lore YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.